Hi, everyone. Welcome back to MCBK North America chapter. This is day 2. Um, I'm still myself, speaking for myself, am still thrilled, excited, glowing from yesterday's fantastic meeting. We had a great set of speakers, wonderful set of poster presenters. I really valued the audience participation and the back and forth, the community that we were able to start building in yesterday's session. And I'm really excited about continuing that further today because we have yet even more exciting sessions that I'll get into in a little bit further as I get into some of the day 2 programming and also just some hopefully helpful logistics that help your experience with today's events go along smoothly. But before I move forward, I just wanted to reach out to my co-chair, Nancy Alley, and see, Nancy, how are you doing today? And how are you feeling about what we experienced yesterday, and what we're about to experience here today?
I'm so excited to be part of this. I think our presenters yesterday were simply wonderful, and we had so much helpful information about what's going on with AI and synergies with learning health systems. So very excited about that. And then beyond thrilled that we have a library panel for today, and we'll be looking at ways that we can integrate the library community even more into MCBK.
Fantastic. Um, I know folks are probably still kind of rolling in. We're only a couple minutes in, but I think we're okay to move on to some of the Zoom guidelines here, just to help ensure that you all have the optimal user experience possible. And so here are some helpful hints, hopefully, and we're here to help support you too, should you run into any logistical issues. Hopefully not, but just in case. So let me just cover some technical notes here. So first off, all of today's meeting will be held on Zoom through this link, which you've already accessed if you're here with us and now and hearing me, hopefully. It's available in the calendar invitation and the email that you received from NORCON. This entire session is being recorded and will be made available after March 3rd. The chat feature is available, and you're encouraged to participate actively throughout all the sessions. So feel free to ask questions or add comments in the chat. And we'll have dedicated time at the end of each session to address questions. On that point too, feel free to raise your hand when there are times during a Q&A to unmute and verbally ask your questions. But until that point, if that were to occur, everyone is muted during those presentations, just so that there's no audio interference. The meeting program, speaker information, and technical demo abstracts are available on the MCBK website, which I believe it should be included in the email that you received, along with a link to this session today. And lastly, if you encounter any technical issues, our support team of Noor Khan, Chase Masters, and Janelle Burley are available to assist you. So feel free to reach out to any of them, or myself or Nancy, if you run into any logistical issues along the way, and we'll do all we can to help troubleshoot. All right, so moving to today's program, we have more exciting events and speakers lined up. We will be hearing from Philip Scott about the MCBK UK chapter at the quarter after the hour. We'll then have presentations from Laura Hall, Bart Reagan, and Philip Walker on how librarians are leading the way when it comes to MCBK. The North America chapter is officially rolling out a governance structure. So you'll have a chance to hear about that when we have, you'll be a chance to hear about that from Nancy Lorenzi at 2:45 Eastern. We'll then take a break, and then coming back, we will have technical demos, um, which should be really cool, and be able to engage with those presenters and do that. And then lastly, or near to last, we will have updates from our work group chairs from our three MCBK working groups in MCBK NA working groups. And then lastly, we should have a fairly quick wrap up so we don't get too far into your Fridays and get into your weekends much. So I think this is a very packed, exciting day that we have, and looking forward to diving into the activities that we have. And in terms of the demos, maybe a little bit, some comments there, and we'll be happy to share the demo information certainly as we move into that session. We'll be breaking into separate rooms. And I think that slide, there it is. Yes, thank you. We'll be breaking into 3 rooms, each room dedicated to a demo, which you can attend, and you'll hear from the presenter giving that demo, and then they will be available for Q&A after. So Fareed Saifi, demonstrating how diverse users of CBK artifacts can benefit from metadata-driven documentation and packaging. That'll be in room 1. Preston Lee, migrating clinical knowledge artifacts to FHIR. That's in room 2. And forgive me if I do not pronounce your name correctly. My apologies. Janos Mate, challenges and solutions of an interoperable clinical decision support implementation. Very cool. I'm looking forward to those. That is a pretty brief, hopefully explanatory description of our events today. I see that we still have a few minutes before Philip's scheduled time. And so I didn't know, Nancy or even Chuck, if there were additional pieces of information that you wanted to share about yesterday's activities, or observations about what we have coming up today.
Josh, you may want to mention with regard to the demos that they're in parallel, so only one of them can be experienced during real time in the meeting. But will people who want to see other demos be able to access recordings of those sessions after the meeting is over?
Fantastic question. And I would defer to our fearless leader, Noor Khan, on those on something like that. Noor, are you able to edify us on how these meetings demos might be shared afterwards?
Yes, we will have all meeting recordings uploaded to our MCBK YouTube channel, hopefully the Monday after this meeting. So you should receive an email about that. And also on the sort of meeting webpage link that I shared in the chat, we also link all of the YouTube videos and meeting slides and chat discussion records. So yeah, everything will be available after.
Wonderful. Maybe build a follow-up question to that too, is are participants, today's audience members, able to move from room to room during the sessions as they happen?
We will allow people to select where they want to be, so you can move back and forth, but based on the timing for today, we're just showing each demo once and then allowing the authors to do their Q&A discussion. So unless you want to only see a few minutes of each demo, it might be best to select one and listen in on that.
That's great. Okay.
So,
Great information.
Josh, maybe we want to open it up for some interaction in chat. So yesterday we asked people to share with us where they're coming from for the meeting today, and if they've attended an MCBK meeting before. Also, you might share with us if you attended day 1 and what a key takeaway might have been for you as you've had a chance to reflect on that from yesterday. So feel free to share with us in chat if you would like.
I know I'm going to enter in mine right now, coming from San Francisco. And
And I'll just say mine instead of putting it in chat, but I thought it was interesting that David Dorr shared that OHSU So Oregon Health Sciences University is going to be establishing a center for AI-enabled learning, and it will be interesting to see what comes out of the new center that they will have.
Fantastic. And I'm seeing folks contributing to the chat. Like yesterday, Nancy, this is so cool seeing all of the places that people are coming from. Oh, here's a Canada entry. Love it. Welcome. And there we see from New York to Arizona. I mean, it's covering from
It's great. And I'm going to
entire
ask my
continent.
colleague, PF Anderson, who's responded in chat. She shared a posting earlier with our colleagues at Michigan, what one of the resources that she saw yesterday that she was excited about. So PF, would you mind entering that link into chat if you have a chance?
I love these messages. Welcome, Andrea, from Los Angeles to your first MCBK meeting. We are so happy to have you joining us today. Thank you. You know, Nancy, just we have 3 more minutes before Philip kicks us off, and I wanted to take a moment. I think you would agree to express
Oh,
thanks and appreciation for the fantastic work that that some really special professionals have done in
yes.
making this MCBK North America event happen. And if I could call them out and then uh, you can send your kudos along with me. So first and foremost, want to send appreciation to NORCON, who has been the real driving force in pulling all of our meetings together, our agendas, being in contact and helping to coordinate our presenters, the meeting materials, you name it down the list. Nor really appreciate all that you've been doing and are continuing to do and helping us successfully make this MCBK North America event as awesome as it has been, and thank you for everything you've done. My thanks also go out to Janelle Burley, to Josh Rubin and Chase Masters for your participation and support all throughout this. Could not have done this without you, and so I just want to make sure that we acknowledge those folks that are doing the really hard work and heavy lifting in the background and have been in making this event happen.
I agree completely with that, and just want to add my thanks to yours. They've been amazing in making this meeting work, and then also a pleasure to work with you, Josh. So I think we've had a dream team in terms of the planning team that we've gotten to work with.
And likewise, thank you so much, Nancy. This has been a real pleasure in getting to work with you. And I've really appreciated the coming together of the informatics in the library world. I mean, we know that there's that overlap, but really making it even more explicit and bringing it to the bear here vis-a-vis mobilizing computable biomedical knowledge. I think there's just so many synergies, ways to catalyze the energies and expertise that these communities bring together. It's fantastic to see it in one place and kind of building out a larger, as you put it, to me, a professional home, and making
Yes,
MCBK yet another professional home for so many of our experts.
could not agree more. Very appreciative of that.
Just wanted to quickly jump in and say that we fortunately have had quite a bit of participation from people around the country and I guess a bit of North America. We had 197 unique attendees yesterday, so that's pretty exciting. And we hope that those who are joining us today will also have a really great experience.
Here, here. Nora, I know we're now at the point of the program at 10:15 Pacific time here in San Francisco, and I was wondering if I don't know if Philip is in the wings waiting to present, or if we have a recording ready to go.
We'll be having a recorded talk. I'll let Nancy introduce Dr. Scott for us.
Sure.
Fantastic.
Happy to do the introduction. So I'm introducing Dr. Philip Scott, who is the co-chair of the MCBK UK chapter, and that's along with Jeremy Wyatt, his fellow co-chair. Dr. Philip Scott worked in the National Health Service in a variety of IT development and management roles for 15 years before moving into academia in 2009 in roles in academic health and care informatics. After 12 years at the University of Portsmouth, Philip is now Professor of Digital Health and Care Professions at the University of Wales, Trinity St. David. He is Deputy Editor of BMJ Health and Care Informatics and UK National Representative to the International Medical Informatics Association and the European Federation of Medical Informatics. He is a Fellow of the British Computer Society, serves on the board of HL7 UK, and co-chairs the British Computer Society Working Group on Computable Biomedical Knowledge. Dr. Scott is unable to join us live today due to the time difference, but fortunately he recorded his update, which we will share with you now.
MCBK in the United Kingdom. So, by way of introduction, my day job is Professor of Digital Health and Care at the University of Wales, Trinity St David, and I'm co-chair of the UK chapter of MCBK along with Jeremy Wyatt. So what I'm going to do today is briefly give you a recap of the work that we've done with NICE, the National Clinical Guidelines Body in England and Wales, and then how that has changed their approach to guideline development and their new strategy for structured recommendations and products development. And then I just want to dwell on where we might go next in terms of the gap to turning their structured recommendations into actual computable biomedical knowledge. So back in 2022, we put forward this proposal to have collaborathons to explore how to represent guidelines in a computable way. That ran until March 2023, and it was really a social engineering project to get people together and figure out how to try and unpack this problem. We brought together clinicians, academics, and industry experts, looking particularly at NICE Guideline 28 about adult type 2 diabetes. We had a series of sprints and 2 face-to-face collaborathon events. We ended up adopting the World Health Organization Digital Adaptation Kit as a very good technology agnostic model because we recognized we were nowhere near ready to build something actually directly implementable. What that led to was NICE developing a new strategy for product development. And although it sounds a bit negative, perhaps, the very first bullet point here, they said we will not generate computable recommendations. But what they are planning to do is enable machine readable content for other users external to NICE to have visibility of structured recommendations. So they set out a time frame of 2 years from December of last year to deliver this product strategy. And just to show you how far they have to go, the last section there, they even have to think about standardizing the wording. So at the moment, within, for example, guidelines around breast cancer, they use different English words to represent the meaning of the clinical state. For example, early, locally advanced versus invasive, locally invasive. And so inconsistent wording obviously is a basic barrier to computability. So a long way still to go. But this is what they've set out as their standard. They have these 5 core components that they propose to have in all structured recommendations to identify the population to which it's applicable, the indication that it is applicable, contraindications that it's not applicable, the actions that it specifies, and the outcomes which are intended or indeed measurable. So that's fine, but obviously that is not computable biomedical knowledge. There's a big gap even to get to the digital adaptation kit of the World Health Organization, let alone something which is implementable. So when we think about each of those 5 components, just a few thoughts about what those gaps might be and how we might fill them in that continuing journey towards CBK. So population, well, we need to think about basic patient data. There's a FHIR patient resource. It may be things like sex or age that leads to the applicability or non-applicability of a particular guideline, just at the demographic level, let alone the clinical level. In England, we have a thing called the Quality and Outcomes Framework, which is a specified set of clinical codes to identify particular diseases and how they're managed, and this is used as an incentive framework for general practitioners. But again, that identification of particular disease groups is potentially a way of identifying particular populations. When we come to indication, well, we obviously think about things like SNOMED CT codes for clinical findings, for example. We might also think again about another English standard for laboratory reports. In the UK, we don't use LOIC for some strange reason, but we have our own SNOMED CT based approach to this. But again, it offers a mechanism for being part of the identification of particular indications. For contraindications, we can think about widely used commercial products such as the FDB Multilex drug database, which identifies drug-drug interactions, for example. And then when we come to the actions, well, there's numerous possibilities. We could think about the DM&D, which again is the local Dictionary of Medicines and Devices for England and Wales. We also have, again, SNOMED CT, possibly things like procedure codes, as well as actual processes. So we think about the BPM Plus process modeling language and the way that that can be used to define processes as well as specific interventions. When it comes to outcomes, well, who knows? That could be potentially absolutely anything. So I think that's very much an open question at this stage. And of course, the whole FHIR clinical practice guidelines approach, how does that sit? How do we get towards something that structured, or indeed do we get that far? There's a lot of definitional and questions about what is the business goal here. But I think there are ways we can move forward. I'm thinking about some further industry workshops to explore collaborative activity in this space so that we can find something which is more than the current NICE approach. How far it gets us towards CBK, I think, is still another open question. So I welcome your ideas on how we can help close that gap. Reference to the paper there of the early stages of the NICE Computable Implementation Guidance Project. I welcome any comments or thoughts that you have on this subject. So thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you to Dr. Scott. And so while he's not here to answer questions, if you want to enter into chat any comments you have or responses to the question that he posed, we'll make sure to capture those. Any comments?
Well, I might just add that I said yesterday in my brief introductory remarks that there will be a loose governance over MCBK Global so far with the 2 chapters that we have established, NA and for North America and UK that you just heard about. And the goal of that governance will be to promote collaboration and coordination of activities across the Atlantic and with other chapters that may form. So we heard yesterday from, we heard yesterday from Brian Alper and others who are doing work that aligns very nicely with what is going on at NICE in the UK in collaboration with MCBK UK. So I think there's potential for transatlantic collaboration here that I'm personally very excited about. And if anyone here would like to be part of that collaboration, please write to me, and we'll be sure that that's communicated to our colleagues across the Atlantic. Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck. Any comments from anyone else? Either chat or raised hand. If you'd like to talk.
This is Josh, Nancy, and just a quick comment. I'm noticing that in myself, there's a knowledge gap that I have in terms of the participation level or levels of librarians from the UK perspective. And I don't know, maybe it's a Chuck question, but I'm curious, and maybe I'll need to do some further digging around the degree to which librarians are from the UK world are participating in MCBK. I don't know. Do you have any insights or indications?
Chuck, I can share some information, or I don't know if you have any response to that.
Oh, go ahead, Nancy. I think we're going to talk about the same person.
I'm not sure. Is it Sue Lacey Bryant?
Yes.
So, so Sue Lacey Bryant is in the UK. She I think connected to the NHS for a while, and she is now working at a university where I'm trying to remember, but she's working at a if Jerry knows, please put it in the chat. Jerry Perry, who's also working with Sue, but Sue and Jeff Watson, I believe is his last name. They have gathered together a Mobilizing Computable Knowledge UK roundtable group. And so we've had a couple of meetings, and and Sue Lacey Bryant gave a presentation at the 2024 MCBK Global Meeting. Thank you, Nora, with a link to that. So, so I know that that this roundtable group is sharing information, and I was on a call recently, our most recent roundtable session, where I was asked to present about work that I was involved in terms of knowledge management and mobilizing computable knowledge. And so I shared some information, and I asked the question, how could librarians be more involved in the CBK effort? And there was a faculty member on the call who said he would love to have librarian support, integration, partnership at the local level. And so I volunteered to visit Ireland, to go to Dublin to help with that effort. But Sue Lacey Bryant is also on it. So she has her group of UK librarians who are going to be addressing that issue of how librarians can be involved at the local level, which I think is a wonderful effort. Also, I will mention that so I'm senior associate editor for the journal Learning Health Systems, and we have an upcoming special issue on health equity. And we have, for the first time, 3 guest editors. So Jerry Perry, Terry Wheeler, and Sue Lacey Bryant. So we have not only 3 guest editors for that special issue, but we have an international group now of special editors who are pulling together articles on health equity related to learning health systems. Thank you, Jerry.
Fantastic.
Manchester Metro University. and former lead officer for library services for health education in England. She's doing wonderful work, and so I would encourage people who are interested in the UK activity to look at that link that Nora provided from the MCBK global meeting when Sue Lacey Bryant spoke. And thank you. Nora also shared the link to the call for submissions for the health equity special issue. So we'd love to see more articles submitted for that special issue. And I think we may be good on time for moving into the next segment of our program. So within MCBK, we are encouraging our library community to become active partners in our efforts toward mobilizing biomedical knowledge and ensuring that our shared values of keeping information available and accessible to current researchers, scientists, scholars, and future generations are sustained. Less than a year ago, members of the MCBK Health Equity and Access to Learning Work Group published a call to action in the Journal of the Medical Library Association. This article emphasizes that to advance towards states of improved health equity, health information professionals need to engage in and encourage the conduct of research at the intersections of health equity, health disparities, and computable biomedical knowledge applications. And it also, the article provides a set of recommendations for action. The link is posted in the chat if you would like to read the article in full. And I just want to say many colleagues from that HEAL group who participated in producing that call to action are attending today, they're participants today, and Jerry Perry, Deborah Swain, Josh Rubin, Gabe Rios, and I'm sorry if I'm leaving anybody out. Feel free to chime in chat and say that you were part of it, but I appreciate the effort that went into that call to action. Now, if we can move on to the next panel that we have today. We have a group of librarians from across the country, from Vanderbilt, UVA, and New Mexico. And these librarians are leading the way in many efforts relevant to our conference themes. So today we're going to be delighted to hear from these three colleagues who are leaders in championing ways that librarians can have an impact at the intersection of AI, learning health systems, and libraries. We have with us Laura Hall, who serves as the division head for resources, archives, and discovery at the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Library and Informatics Center. In this role, she leads initiatives that support education, research, and patient care, with a particular emphasis on the stewardship and development of the library's collections. She developed and hosts AI Crossroads, a community of practice, a monthly open forum that fosters collaborative learning among Health Sciences Center faculty and staff to navigate the rapidly evolving landscape of generative AI. And she is serving as co-principal investigator for a study on generative AI in higher education, as well as serving as principal investigator of an exploratory ChatGPT study examining the local impact of AI on teaching, learning, and research practices. We also have with us Bart Reagan. Bart Reagan is the director of the Claude Moore Health Sciences Library at the University of Virginia. His work focuses on developing innovative methods to support the research life cycle, emphasizing the integration of library services through advanced support for software tools that facilitate data acquisition, manipulation, analysis, and discovery. Bart's professional interests include promoting reproducibility and replicability in science, advancing open access models for federally funded research, and providing instructional support for scientific automation tools. Bart has published in the areas of clinical translational science and the political economy of federally sponsored data. Philip Walker is the director of the Annette and Irwin Eskind Family Biomedical Library and Learning Center at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, and he's currently enrolled in a doctorate in health informatics program at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. Mr. Walker is also an adjunct faculty member of the Vanderbilt School of Nursing with research interests pertaining to the information needs and information seeking behavior of the health sciences community, biomedical and health informatics, knowledge translation, evidence-based practice, and information ecology. So welcome presenters, and I will turn it over to Bart Reagan, who will be our first presenter.
All right. Let's see if I can figure out how to share a screen. All right. Is everybody seeing a slide deck? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So as well as working at the Health Sciences Library here at UVA, I also have a pretty significant role with our CTSA Institute, which is the Integrated Translational Health Research Institute of Virginia. It's not just UVA, it involves a variety of partners and collaborators, but I think some of the value that I might be able to bring to this conversation today is really about the synergies or that overlap, that Venn diagram, if you will, of what do libraries do and how do libraries support, information resource needs, that kind of thing, as well as how does a translational science institute sort of connect with, better patient care and health equity and things like that. So that's my angle in looking at all this, and see if I can, there we go, advance my slides. So I am literally the person that went to a learning health system conference last year because I wanted to know what learning health systems were. And part of that is because we don't have a department of learning health systems here at UVA. Now, what I learned is a lot of what we do, we just call it something different. A lot of that work kind of comes out of our quality office. But since I work with our iThrive unit, as well as, iThrive obviously very integrated with learning health systems and things like that, I wanted to learn more. So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, so forgive me if this is very basic, but really these notes are kind of for me. So as I've learned about learning health system, it really is sort of figuring out that translation of that research findings into patient care. Well, guess what? Libraries really care about these things, and we really want to support these things. Embedding clinical research into evidence-based care practice, into the delivery of care. I think almost every health sciences library in this country would argue or say that they support these type of activities and are really passionate about it. As everybody knows, implementing a learning health system is complex. And for us, that's even a little bit more complex than maybe institutions or translational science institutes where you have one hospital, one learning health system, one CTSA, that kind of thing. For us, since we have multiple health systems involved, it just adds a layer of complexity to how we think about a learning health system and how libraries and AI and things like that relate to it. We know that learning health systems can enable innovation and support that continuous quality improvement. Again, that's kind of our angle at UVA. When we came back, we have a quality office, and we realized it's like, oh, our library's been supporting this for a number of years in a variety of ways. And then lastly, it requires participation and resources from a wide range of stakeholders. This includes your healthcare leaders, your clinical providers, your patients, payers, researchers, and then the part I added is librarians, because I think librarians are really important to this overall process in a variety of ways. So the other model I like is this AHRQ model, but mainly because it's simple, and I like to think of things very simply. So it's data and it's evidence and it's practice or practice change. If you like models, there's plenty of them out there. So you feel free to dig into these. And what I like about these models is they all sort of share, similar aspects of what they do, but they are geared in a way that allows either the individual entity to kind of think about how they approach learning health systems, or to think about it in different contexts and things like that. For me personally, I really like this Kaiser Permanente model. I like the fact that it's broken down into these columns of input, outputs, and outcomes, and that really, for me, helped me kind of figure out how do I think about it personally as a librarian, but also how do we think about it in the context of iThrive? And I'll show you my version of this model here in a few slides. But what I want to describe to you now is a little bit about who iThrive is. So like I said, iThrive is, we really consider ourselves a state organization. We have UVA, which is centrally located in the state of Virginia. We also have, as part of our partners, is the Virginia Tech Carilion system. And if you don't know anything about Virginia, like we're kind of centrally located, and we have ties to the northern part of the state in that DC area. Virginia Tech Carilion has a different population base, a different patient base, different schools and different things like that into what's known as the Virginia Tech Carilion. And so that involves Virginia Tech, but also the Carilion Health System. And so this is really sort of, when I talked about the complexity of thinking about a learning health system for iThrive, this is the complex part, right? Like you can imagine that UVA is not going to tell VTC or Virginia Tech Carilion how they should, operate their learning health system. They know what their priorities are. They know their patients well better than we do, and things like that, and vice versa. What we want to build in iThrive is a mechanism and a means for people to connect with the resources that they need. And again, I'll show you. I want to make sure. Okay, yeah, that's on the next slide. I'll tell you more about that in the next slide. The other thing that I just want to highlight is we have these amazing collaborators. And again, thinking from a statewide context, we have Virginia State University, which is an HBCU. We have the Virginia Department of Health as one of our collaborators. We have the Virginia Cooperative Extension as one of our collaborators. All of, those two in the middle, sort of, they help us cover that state and understand what the statewide needs are. We also have the Center for Open Science, which is an international organization. They just happen to be located here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And it's just a wonderful organization, sort of concerned with reproducibility and replicability and things like that. And so they're just another one of our amazing collaborators. So that's iThrive. As we kind of think about learning health systems, the real point is to not create one learning health system to rule them all. It's like, how do we support learning health systems in the state of Virginia, if that makes sense? So here's my version of the Kaiser Permanente model. One thing that I did is I matched the colors to the blocks, right? So as I've thought about this, iThrive coming in from that left-hand side is, the resource sort of aspect of this. Of course, we're going to have inputs. Again, we have an EHR, electronic health record, here at UVA. Virginia Tech's going to have their own version. There are other forms of data that we're all aware of. It could be, the social drivers of health. It could be community research. It could be how do we identify those disparities in healthcare in the state of Virginia by working with our collaborators and partners and so forth. And then the outputs can be institution specific, or they could be tools that we develop that anybody can use, and you just use your data, right? So we can help people harmonize data. We can help people create data visualization so you can understand, what the issue is, what the challenges are, and then how the mitigation strategies might come to sort of produce those better outcomes. We might develop informatics tools. We're building a health data research exchange right now, which is a place where you can put data. It can be in a protected environment. You can process the data, get your answer, and then be able to use that in, informing that practice change and stuff like that. And that's really sort of the last outcome, here. It's like, what do we want to do? We want to improve health. We want we want health equity throughout the state. We want to influence policy in ways that produce good practice changes, but also, just those better outcomes for the state and the patients. What I want to say about the Research Concierge portal, which you'll see down there in the links down there in the bottom, you can go to this website and take a look. It's a warehouse of resources. And what I really like about the portal is you can see it as just an observer from the outside. But if I log in, it provides to me the general resources that are available to anyone. But then it also provides specific information that may be, let's say I'm a clinical researcher, specific to my role at UVA. And so I might be connected through the portal as a UVA clinical researcher with UVA library resources, or they could be from our research data capture group, the people that run REDCap, or they could be the BIRD or the bio, the informatics people, or the people that do the statistics and epidemiology and things like that. If I was a Virginia Tech Carilion researcher, I would log in, I would see those same general resources, but now I might see my library and connect with my librarians or my other data scientists or statisticians or other people and so forth. So it really is kind of a wonderful resource to kind of walk into the door, but then be surrounded by the resources that are more specific to your needs and to the environment that you have to be working in. And that's how we kind of think about that learning health systems, that we're providing that data to inform healthcare decisions, but we're providing it in context of who the person is and what they're trying to achieve and where they sit in the whole process. So this Venn diagram right here is really just to sort of explain that as a researcher, or as a clinician, or as a community member, you don't have to know where the resources are. You may come at the system, you may start with iThrive, and it may be a library resource and you're directed that way. Or you may start in the health system and then you think you go to iThrive, and then iThrive kicks you back to the library. The library says, no, we can't help you with REDCap, but we know who can help you. So the point is, it's like the relationships matter here. And the more that we know about the resource environment overall, the more we can reduce the burden of the practitioner in getting what they need so that they can produce the best care to the patient. Like, they're the ones in the best position to sort of improve health. What we want to do is to reduce their barriers to give them access to what they need so that they can go off and do really good things when it comes to patient care. AI is definitely part of this. I think my library, we're trying to figure this out. We're definitely working in this space in a variety of ways, but to be quite frank, like, we're trying to figure this out. So we have right now we have an innovation arc. So we have a strategic plan that sort of arcs over the library, and we're thinking about innovation. And, we're looking at things like, what's the difference between Copilot Chat and Copilot M360, like embedding it in an Office suite versus just going to a chat tool. And we're trying to figure out, how do we arrange our information sources so that we can leverage the power of AI to sort of reduce the burden on our own staff internally. In other words, we could take all the meeting minutes from every committee in the library and then produce like an executive summary every week of what's going on in the library without having to go to 12 different places. The other thing we've done is we had a request around biographies, and I know this isn't really learning health system related, but what we found was, if you gave it like a CV or a resume or something like that, it could parse through that pretty good and give you a decent biography. It didn't know historical context, so it doesn't remove the burden of having like a historian kind of understand, how do you place this person in terms of history. But the other thing that it did that was quite bad was, if you gave it like an article written about this person, it would plagiarize the heck out of it and really kind of set up a liability situation that you didn't want to put stuff out on the open internet. And so you have to be really, really careful there. And so we kind of backed away from that project. In terms of our patrons, we're doing things like this week, one of our data scientists, we have 2 of those in our library, taught a workshop on best practices in generative AI. Likewise, they are also teaching people how to use it coding in appropriate ways, with R and Python and things like that. There's a tendency of people to want to just plug it in there and assume it's giving you good results or it's efficient. Our data scientists are now teaching people how to use it in good ways. Likewise, we also have our School of Medicine library liaison is developing a critical appraisal. Libraries do this. Like, we help people read an article and understand the level of the evidence and how far you can trust this. Now we're starting to build in a process where we can teach people, how do you trust AI? How do you know that you have good resources? What do you need to check? And how do you give a good prompt and things like that? And then the last thing is just considering, where does fairness and ethics fit in all this? I mean, I think we all know that AI can hallucinate, or that it's a black box and you don't know what's in a large language model, and whether or not that model is good for the question that you're trying to answer. And so we're trying to, as information professionals, trying to help our users who want to use these tools understand how they should be using them at this state and time here in 2025. And then lastly, I just kind of want to mention this article that we produced. This is about 25 librarians last fall produced this article at the Journal of Clinical Translational Science, and it's about 20 some odd librarians from 20 some odd institutions. What I really want to say here, and I want to encourage everybody, whether you are a researcher or a research administrator or you're a librarian, the part of this article is to take the translational science funding announcement and to map what libraries do to help people understand how libraries can support translational science. You see the AI stuff down there highlighted, but what I want to mention is, since this is 20 some odd librarians, this is all things that libraries do, but not all libraries do the same things, right? So my library, we do X, Y, and Z. What we want to do is to be able to go and interface with a researcher and say, hey, what do you need? Here are sort of a menu of services that we do. Or reverse that and have like a researcher or a research administrator saying, hey, here's what I need or what we need. What does your library do, or what can your library do that might support this? And we really feel like this type of menu a la carte model is a great way to start a conversation between libraries and translational science institutes and learning health system departments and quality offices and things like that about what resources and services are really available, because libraries are stronger when we're sort of making other people's work stronger as well. We're supporting the work that needs to be done. And so just lastly, I just want to thank some of the people in my library, Dr. David Martin, Brenna Kent, Allison Cruz, and David Moody, who do a lot of the work that I'm talking about. And then also iThrive, which is a really important organization and really value the partnership that my library has with iThrive. So with that, I will shut up and I will turn it over to one of my colleagues. Nancy, I assume we're doing questions at the end, but correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. Thank you. Questions at the end. People can be writing questions in chat now if they would like, but we'll take them at the end.
All right. All right. Well, are y'all seeing the slide presentation? I'm working on 3 monitors and I have no idea which ones. I was looking for my green box around which one of these screens. But I'll
Yes, we're
take your word for
seeing.
it.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, just thank you, Josh and Nancy. I can't say enough gratitude about this opportunity, and Chuck and the Michigan team as well for keeping this movement going. So my name is Philip Walker from Vanderbilt University, and going with the theme of AI libraries and learning health systems, I'm going to be specifically talking about generative AI, similar in to what I think it was Dr. Dorr who mentioned about generative AI and insights. And this was, I had no idea what he was talking about, but I'm so glad we were able to really blend day 1 and day 2. So I'm going to be talking about synthesizing information artifacts for administrative. Also, as I was thinking on the drive into work today, there's an evaluative component here. There's and also a strategic component here as well, that with some of the efforts that I've been working on in our learning healthcare platform. So just to reiterate the definition of learning healthcare, we're looking at that science and informatics incentives and culture being aligned for continuous improvement, innovation. I like to also think of, at least from the 8 years I've been involved with LHS here, that
Hey,
it's
Philip?
really, yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think we're seeing your slide view that doesn't advance as you go through the slides. So it's got the
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Let's see if we can reshare. All right, because that's the one that's on. Let's see if this one works better. All right.
That's the one that shows you the slide that's coming next, but probably works.
No,
That
no,
works.
that works.
Yes.
That works. Okay. All right. So just reiterating definition. I like to think from my 8 years of experience with learning health systems here that it's really about sciences, because we've got, I mean, between biomedical, we've got cognitive science, implementation science, social sciences as well, and of course, information science and data science. And how do we do that? I love what one of the first articles that was put out from the Vanderbilt platform was that learning healthcare systems helps us improve how we care for patients while we are taking care of them. And we do that here. Yes, there was a robust infrastructure here, hospital epidemiology, surveillance, and monitoring. But the approach that we took here was related to pragmatic clinical trials. And that is, for anyone who's new to that, defined by the Mayo Clinic proceedings in 2023, a spectrum of trials with design elements that closely resemble how patients are treated in clinical practice and are intended to evaluate how treatments affect outcomes. So that's been our approach here. And what that does is that we bring together a team similar to an IRB almost, where we can evaluate study methodologies and try to incorporate learning healthcare into the medical center. And actually, I should have advanced the slide with that. So, yes. So, how does this platform work? So, with the 8 steps here, an investigator has an idea, submits a REDCap survey, the application is reviewed. And then once we have an application, we have what's called an LHS workshop, which is kind of that interdisciplinary team of people who look at methodology, um, ethics, uh, waiver of consent, which is the ideal study methodology, and uh, informatics folks are represented, biostatistics are represented as well. And then from there, after that workshop, there's a summary. Sometimes we may have to have another workshop, or some revisions may be done outside of the workshop environment. Some investigators have had to do what's called a studio, whether it's biostatistics or sometimes informatics, if there was some sort of a build required. And then from there, it comes down to the executive committee review, which is also multidisciplinary, but a little larger than the workshop group. And then from there, what we do at the executive level is we will approve it so that the study can go forth. Now, here is where, in my initial discussions with some of the directors, is where I saw opportunity, and which I'm hoping that my colleagues around the country can also see opportunity. Because within this process, within the platform, are many artifacts that come about. And as you can see, just from the application itself, which at level number 2, which is where I'm going to demonstrate some of the generative AI examples. And then from there, by the time we do the workshop and the comments from the workshop, and then also whatever feedback we have pending approval or to resubmit, as well as the material that comes from the study itself, and then finally the publication. So there's a lot of opportunities here to be able to look at from an administrative realm, as I mentioned, looking at evaluating the different steps within the Learning Health Systems platform, trying to also collate. So as we go through a workshop and we determine whether or not a particular methodology, can we randomize the clinical providers or the practitioners, or do we randomize the patients? Do we do a step wedge? All kind of things that come about from those discussions, and to be able to determine whether or not this fits a learning healthcare mission and goal. And also to be able to look at the publications that come about from this, which I find to be very interesting, and to be able to see the development of the process through the final product. And also,
Philip,
yes,
sorry, excuse me.
yes.
I think it's a little hard to see the text in the slide just based on the view.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're possibly able to go to display settings. If you want, I can also share the slides for you. I have no problem doing that.
Okay, that's fine. I'm actually, I think I only have about 3 or 4 more, but if it's better on your end, that's fine.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share
Yeah.
that for you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. No problem. So next time I'll just unplug the other 2 monitors. All right. Okay. So as I was just mentioning, within the platform and the way the process works from conceptualization all the way through the research study and eventual publication, is that there are many artifacts here that are, one, uh, enables knowledge management, information management. There's curation here. There's also, it's through the use of generative AI, being able to go ahead and synthesize what happens throughout this entire platform. You can advance, Nora. So a few examples of what I've been doing with 10 of the red cap surveys that's part of the application. So that's step number 2. And well, go back. And yeah, just for transparency, just wanted to say that I've been using the Vanderbilt internal large language model, which is called Amplify, and I use the Claude 3.5 Sonnet at a temperature setting of 0.6. So yes, go ahead and advance. So my first prompt was to be able to, one, look at whether or not the applications fit with a learning healthcare mission. And I do this through the information scientist persona, so that I'll go in and ask whether or not it fits. And it agreed. So obviously, all of these applications did go through study. So that kind of validates what the model perceived as well. And this is what themes that it brought about, on whether or not, one, it understood what at least our learning health system, what it's based on, and then what these studies were also pertaining to. So it's good to know that there was some sort of a congruence here between the large language model and those applications and my prompts. Next slide. So from there, continuing on as the information scientist persona, I would asked it to look at whether or not there are possibilities of computable biomedical knowledge within these applications. And this is just the basic application. Of course, there's much richer data as we get through the process, but that's for another presentation or publication. So here, yes, it picked up that there are particular risk models available. There's EHR decision support available as well within the 10 submitted studies. So, next slide. And then from there, try to elaborate a little bit more on the chart and ask it questions about what exactly do you see within these studies that we can transfer from conceptualization through publication. So we did it here, but now if we want to be able to implement it, what exactly can we take from these studies to be able to bring in to the medical center? In addition, what I like about this is that I feel, without really, I guess, getting too deep into the woods about generalizability, but I think it's little synthesis like this that can also be able to determine, says, hey, this is what other institutions, not academic as well as non-academic, can begin to see if they have that type of infrastructure as well. So rather than having to go read a full article, maybe with little charts like this or synthesis tables, that you can be able to see exactly what we can pull out from other literature. So here, once again, it did say that, yes, you have risk prediction models, protocols, data integration, automation, a lot of ER embedded tools, and risk prediction you'll see within many of our publications. And then there's BPAs as well as being able to standardize documentation. So next slide. And then lastly, pertaining to the theme, I had to say, well, hey, we know, what is it that the information scientists or librarians, what is it that we can contribute to do with learning health systems? I mean, if of course, if it's applicable, we do understand that not all institutions are the same, but you know, information is there. That's what drew me to this and the discussions with one of the directors, is that I saw a role of information science and I saw a role of the library just because of the information involved. And with that, being able to go in and saying that, hey, there's a lot of data produced within this platform or within this, or what is now called the Center for Learning Healthcare. There's a lot of information. Being able to help them curate the various applications and information artifacts within the Center for Learning Healthcare. Being able to, one of the nice things about using generative AI is that you can take a consumer health educator persona and be able to translate one of these applications or even a publication and say, hey, well, this is at a level that patients can understand of what exactly a learning healthcare system is. Because if you give a patient the definition of a learning healthcare, that's probably going to go over their heads. But can we bring it down to a consumer health levels? Also, um, governance, information policy. I think just about every librarian on this planet took some sort of a policy class, how to be able to go in and govern and manage uh, the amount of artifacts that are existed with and produced by a learning healthcare system. So, and next slide. I think I'm just about done. Yes, I can't say enough about our learning healthcare community here. And I mean, as I say, I've been a part of this for the last 8 years. Have grown professionally. Have engaged with so many people, and being able to find different things that not only that I can be involved with, but my staff can be involved with, and just helping the overall perception of the library as well. So I have to give a lot of credit to Dr. Cheryl Gatto, who is now one of the co-directors of the Center for Learning Healthcare, and the Senior Health Services Analyst, Grace Van Winkle, for sharing the applications with me and just making me a part of the team here. So thank you. I'll hand it over to Laura.
Thank you so much, Phil. And I'm going to try to share my screen as well. And if I don't share the presentation slides, please, of course, let me know. Can everybody see my balloons? Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me today. I am quite honored to be a part of this panel and to be a part of the conference. And I will just echo my other panelists and the support that we received from Josh and Nancy and Noor. And prepping for this was extraordinary, and I'm very grateful for that. I am here at the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Library and Informatics Center. Before I talk more directly about my work and involvement with AI, I want to provide a little bit of context for where I'm coming from. I was reminded in our discussions as panelists, prepping for this, that when you've seen one health sciences library, you've seen exactly one health sciences library. And thinking about that also from the context of an academic health center, how different these organizations can look and the communities that we serve. And so wanted to provide what is some feedback or some broader kind of context for New Mexico. We are, the University of New Mexico is located in this sort of squatty rectangular county right in here. We are home to diverse communities. We are a minority majority state. Much of our population is made up of Hispanics or descendants of. We also have a number of tribal communities, 19 Pueblos, the Navajo Nation being one of the largest, and then, of course, 2 Apache tribes as well. And so that makes up for what is a very culturally rich and diverse kinds of communities. And then there's these healthcare challenges that come along with our state. We are spread out, and geographically there can be miles and miles between a clinic to the next. That there is a shortage in providers in our state. I think that is a bit broader than just our state, of course. And then retention issues that we continue to have to deal with within the state. And as a result, really health equity and this idea of workforce development is really key to our academic health center. And as a result, then also to our health sciences library and how we think about our services and how we serve our community. The one county that is not in a shortage and is not medically underserved is Los Alamos. It's that very small county up there at the top. And I'm sure if you remember your history lessons, went to the movies in the last couple of years, that is home of where the atomic bomb was created in World War II, and still home to the Los Alamos National Labs. So I'm going to keep moving forward. As we're talking about this, the Health Sciences Library is the only publicly accessible library for the state for health sciences. So we serve our local clinicians, our faculty, our students here on campus, but we also serve the broader community in providing access to health information. Really bridging that knowledge gap is one of our mandates for providing equitable access, or that sort of being one of our goals. Advancing literacy, of course, in the state, and that emerging AI literacy. Certainly when we talk about workforce development in the space of AI, I think it's important to acknowledge that we are all learners in this space as it continues to develop and become more and more part of our everyday sort of fabric of existence. I'm going to talk about some of the research projects that I've been working on and share what is some snapshots of the results that came out of those studies. So I've been the co-PI for an Ithaca SR study, making AI generative for higher education. It started in 2023. We're in the last little bit of it. I think we're in the last 9 months of this particular study. And the study itself was aimed to looking at those existing and emerging uses of AI in higher ed. And then with that sort of aim or focus towards strategies or policies or programs for universities and how to sort of deal with, use the word that Ithaca used is harness AI technologies. I'm not sure that's possible to harness sort of from a philosophical perspective, but I think that's probably the best way to describe what the goal of that study was. The design of it is 19 institutions across North America, UNM being one of those institutions in which we did the study. Each of these universities then conducted 15 to 20 semi-structured interviews with faculty and scholars during the last year. So that was actually last spring that we conducted our 20 interviews for UNM. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what our health sciences faculty reported back from those interviews. So the structure of the interviews themselves was looking at teaching and learning, how faculty were really thinking about embracing that in their classrooms, in their teaching, also in research, and then in service or administration. So really that more traditional idea of that three-legged stool for faculty and how we think about AI within those. So this is just some examples of what came out of each of those across those interviews for health sciences. I will note that if you were thinking about it from an Everett Rogers diffusion of innovation, that bell curve, and thinking about how people go about adopting, our health sciences faculty were innovators to probably early majority adopters. There was really nobody in that bottom part of the bell curve, and so it looked a little bit different when you think about the population itself. So they were using it to generate code, really redesigning test questions or simulation scenarios for their students. There was really some deep thinking about how to redesign assignments towards more critical thinking. And these were specifically those types of assignments that really a generative AI tool can do. So if you were asking them to summarize an article for, a journal club or something like that, really your generative AI tool can probably do that and do it at least at a C level, maybe a B level. But really trying to think about how do you redesign those types of assignments for a deeper learning experience. One example that came out of our College of Nursing interview was writing assignments and really thinking about them more in presentation video kind of mode, and that deeper learning that students may need to go through if they are having to practice and put together their slide decks, and think about how do you teach that to your fellow students. And then I emphasize this one thing, and it's really teaching towards practice. And that came up over and over again in all of our health sciences interviews, and to some degree in other professions as well. So specifically in those other, what would you maybe consider professional kinds of degrees, like business or architecture, law. Where there is this idea of how do you teach learners for the field that they enter and not necessarily what is currently in practice in the clinical care. And so over and over again, there was this idea of how do you teach towards practice? How do you prepare learners to be ready for tomorrow? And then there's some examples of research kinds of ways that they wanted to use AI tools in their research. Everything from brainstorming, organizing thoughts, all the way to building an LLM specific towards biomedical sciences. That was one of our innovators in this space, and we did have two, one of them who has been involved in the AI space since the 1990s. So the perspectives were quite different when you started to look at innovators versus those that are sort of maybe early at adopting AI technologies. There was, of course, a number of challenges that were brought up. These are specific, again, for the health sciences interviews that were brought up. And I heard a lot of these actually in this conference, so I don't think anything here is going to be revolutionary. Equity of access, the free versus paid, and that was specific towards learners. UNM does not have what is an AI tool that we're providing across the institution. There was concern, of course, about the variation in how AI is adopted in different disciplines, and that leading to gaps. There certainly were concerns about AI perpetuating bias and racism. That was specific towards health sciences when that was brought up as well, and how that can create more disparities in healthcare as well. And then within that research space, really the policy and regulations may lag behind the capabilities of AI. There was this acknowledgement that AI tools keep on moving forward at their own pace, and our regulations may or may not keep pace. Specifically, the person was mentioning NIH policy about peer review and that not being allowable. So AI was also mentioned that it's not robust enough. It doesn't necessarily have the knowledge base, the subject specialty to, and or the complete information to be able to automate certain types of functions in research. There are concerns towards reproducibility and the reliability of the information. Critical thinking, of course, was brought up. Academic integrity always gets brought up in these types of conversations when you start talking about it within a higher education institution. And then the impact on critical thinking. And I definitely heard something about this yesterday, and just that over-reliance and how we may lose some originality or creativity was what was being expressed. One of our innovators that didn't make it to the slide also mentioned how really for-profit institutions are leading the way, and his desire or concern that really universities, not-for-profits, need to also be involved in this for what is a greater good and not just a profit kind of industry. So another study that I did is this mini ChatGPT study. It was very local, so just to my library for testing out the utility of ChatGPT 4. At the time, that was the model that ChatGPT had in its pro version, and it was just open to the faculty and staff here at the library to just have it as an open sandbox to test it, to explore, learn, innovate, and see what might come of that. So we assembled a research team, did a formal study on this. What it ended up looking like is a pre and post test of the ChatGPT study. We had 15 participants, and just for a frame of reference, we have only 25 employees in the library, so we had a very large number of employees that decided to join in on this sandbox kind of pre and post test study. Most of our participants, just as a baseline of this familiarity, you can see that most were not familiar, only slightly familiar with the tool itself. And over the course of that 6 months, you see it flip, the light green being the pre-test and the dark green being the post-test. So everybody moves from where they were to moderately to that very familiar or moderately familiar kind of space. And likewise with expertise in that, moving from being novice or advanced beginners towards being proficient or being competent in use of the tool. We also saw a shift in use across our library staff and faculty. At the front end of it in the pretest, we asked what were the anticipated uses? What would they want to explore using ChatGPT for? And then towards the end of that, what they actually did and sort of where it may have been fruitful and where it may not have been. And you can really see that writing and correspondence ended up being the largest and sort of predictably so was the largest area. But we also see that the anticipated use of things like research methods and instructional practices and project management was a little less than what was actually used. And so we see a little bit higher in the actual use versus the anticipated use. We also see it moving the opposite way in a few of these, such as data analysis. There was a bit more of a interest in doing it, and you can kind of see that the participants found it a little bit less useful or had less time to do it. And I think there's probably some different challenges that might have occurred there with users or participants. And you can also see some unexpected uses of it. Translating is a fabulous thing, using these tools to translate something to another language. I personally used it to answer a question for an article that was written in Portuguese where I don't have the language skills. So there's some great ways in which you can use these tools to really be able to pull out necessary information to be able to provide some guidance. Meeting transcriptions, things like that. And then you also see an evolution of concerns. Really at the front end of the survey, at the front end of it, there was a lot of concerns towards what was described as hallucinations, reliability of it, ethical sort of considerations towards using these, concerns over privacy and transparency. And while I think every single one of these concerns remained, there's sort of a different expression towards the post-test about what their concerns were. By understanding the limitations of the system a little bit better, they articulated their concerns a little bit differently on the back end of it as well. Again, transparency was probably one of the bigger concerns, as well as privacy, and just those ethical kinds of considerations as well. And then we finally, I'm almost done actually, so I think I talked really fast. Our AI Crossroads, this is a community of practice. We host this for the entire campus, really. Anybody is welcome to join us. It is for the health sciences campus in particular, so faculty, staff, students from all of the 4 colleges and our teaching hospitals to join in on this discussion about use of AI in their work. Oftentimes we have guest presenters in this space as well. We have a student, or one of our grad students will actually be presenting on it next month, excuse me. He'll be talking about his own work, his own research in this space. He did a fellowship with me last fall for looking at AI literacy in his program and for the campus, and giving some guidance on good use of these LLMs and how students and faculty can approach the use of these kinds of tools. But we also talk about how to search the literature, how to use tools such as Elicit, Consensus, Research Rabbit, Cite are all some of the ones that we've talked about. And we have guest presenters also to come and talk about their research and how they're thinking about integrating AI into their workflow. And so just sort of more in the sort of trying to summarize all of this and put this back into that context, I do think libraries do bridge that gap, right, of knowledge. Equitable access to information really is very important. We probably only have to think of recent events to kind of think about how scary it is to think about information not being accessible, not being available where you have relied on it in the past. There are certainly challenges and as well as those opportunities that come along with AI and how it's being integrated into so much of what we're talking about. As sort of slid past this, this idea, and I'm making an assumption that, of course, all of us know publishers are integrating this into their content. The idea of what is format, I think, is sort of a bigger question when you think about reference books versus going to an LLM and what that might look like in the future. And then really just rethinking the role of libraries from that more traditional information access point to AI-powered hubs. And I will just leave with this. I don't necessarily have a full-on answer for this question, but trying to ask something that might be a bit more provocative of how do we ensure that AI and knowledge sharing efforts truly serve diverse communities. So with that, I will thank you. And I think we're opening up for questions.
Yes, so thank you to all of our presenters. And I just want to, I think I speak for everyone when I say, wow, just wow. So thank you to Bart, Philip, and Laura for accepting our invitation to present. I think you've brilliantly illustrated and proved our point, which is librarians belong in the MCBK space. And like my co-host Josh said earlier, we want you to think of MCBK as another professional home for you. Chuck Friedman, founder, one of the founders of MCBK, has been a champion all along for librarians being part of the community. And when we were thinking about this panel, he said, librarians have been doing this all along, so we'd like to hear from them as part of this meeting. And I know from working with Chuck for about 10 years now, that when he opens a door for you, walk through it. It will be a transformative experience. So we welcome everyone who would like to be part of this. And then I want to highlight just a couple of things from our presenters, and then we're going to open this up to questions. So write questions in chat or get ready to raise your hand if you have a question for our presenters. But Bart, I liked what you said in terms of interacting with researchers, that you have a conversation where you ask them what they need. And I think that's a great door opener for librarians getting to be part of partnership opportunities. Philip, you had a great list of ways that librarians can add value in the MCBK space. And then Laura, so much great information about AI, but I also want to call out that you referenced Everett Rogers and diffusion of innovation, and I love that theory. He is a former faculty member at the University of Michigan, so we think of him, his contributions fondly. And so with that, let's open it up to questions. So I'd love to hear, we have some in chat. I think, Nora, are you going to call out the questions in chat and then also see raised hands for people who'd like to ask questions?
Yeah, sure. So I do see there was a little bit of back and forth in the chat, so I just want to look for questions. So Jerry had asked, and this was directed to Laura, I'd like to hear more about the statement, workforce development is key to health equity. Could you say more about roles for libraries in that workforce development space? I'm thinking about capacity building.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. I think that is actually a pretty difficult question to answer in a short period of time, but I'm going to do my best to think about that in that sort of ecosystem and how libraries play a part in that. And you being in Arizona, I know that you know the Western state kind of, and how you can go miles and miles without seeing another community. I think that that's access to information is a key component within that. Having access to what is evidence-based kind of information. How do we kind of come to those decisions in a clinical setting is certainly part of that. And yes, I do think that this goes towards capacity building when you're thinking about workforce development. When you're thinking about AI in all of this space, I think there's also this idea of retooling. What are people that are already in the field, and how do you bring them along with regards to AI and the use of AI in their own clinics or in their own practices, right? And so I think that there are a number of ways in which libraries play that key role in helping to address those questions, being collaborative partners in that kind of space. But we're also that with our learners that are on campus. And like I said at the front end, I think we're all learners in this space. We all kind of have to come together to understand what the capabilities of these tools are, what those limitations are, and then how do we serve those communities? I realize I'm not fully answering the question, because how do you get to the patient? I'm still staying in this back side of it, of the learner and in that development stage versus what that impact of the patient is. But I think if you're not prepared, you're not ready to do it, you're not part of that conversation, you don't have collaborative partners, it's very difficult to really see the improvements that are needed in health equity in a state like ours, the rural. But I think that there's other areas too. It's not just rural states that can be impacted by this. Jerry, did I even come close to answering your question?
Outstanding. You did an outstanding job. Thank you. We have to tee ourselves up to be ready. The retooling thing is key.
Can I add to that? It's just, it reminds me of, so workforce development, we have a scholars program like most CTSAs do. And there's this amazing woman, she's a pediatric GI doc. She's literally one of those human beings that you look at her and I feel like I've wasted my entire life. But she found out about the library because we were doing workforce development. We were training people based on our a la carte list. And she literally used every library service in the next year. We have a presentation studio. She made a video. We have a person that works with identity management. She was consulting with them. She used our data scientist. She eventually went on and got a master's in data science. We have people that are on publications with her and things like that. And I think one of the struggles that libraries have in terms of understanding how, what Laura is saying, getting down to, did you actually improve patient care? It's the same problem that medical schools have. Like, how do you tell that you taught a student this on this particular day actually saved the patient's life, 10 or 15 years later? And I think to some degree, we just have to trust that. But to me, a lot of the value is if we're selling, we're a library, we don't charge typically, but if we're selling services that people find value in and use, I think there's an inherent sort of assumption on the back end that this stuff will be used at some point that really does impact that patient care, things like that.
I see a question in the chat. Josh Richardson brought this up. He says, Bart raised issues with AI maybe using copyrighted content. I'd be interested to hear from him and others on ways that librarians might help monitor or mitigate AI-related copyright infringements of biomedical knowledge in their institutions and beyond.
I don't know if I have an answer here other than be very cautious. And in our particular case, on this morning biography project, we literally had a dean come to us and they're like, hey, well, I want to know, can you produce biographies? Now, we're not historians. We don't typically write histories. We provide resources that other people come in and do that. But we thought it was an interesting use case. And, and for us, like there's this one former dean that worked at our School of Medicine 100 years ago or so, but he was a eugenicist, right? So if you get around even the copyright, like if you just took what was written about this particular individual in the press at the time it was written, he would probably seem like this wonderful guy, right? And he wasn't, to be honest. And so you have to be really careful about what data you're feeding these systems, because it's only going to emulate back what you get it. And we were also just really surprised at the amount of what do you call it, plagiarism. And I think somebody else had this in the chat about, like, you feed it this and it's just going to give you back what you gave it. And so you have to be really careful about those models, and you have to verify. You know, it's not that I can just feed it and just trust it's going to give me stuff. I actually need to go back and see, did it quote it right? Did it take the text and actually give me good content back, or did it manipulate some of the numbers that made it look different? And again, like I said, you can arbitrarily, like you can inadvertently put yourself in a liable situation because you've now taken this, you've trusted it, and I put it on the web as if it's true, and it turns out it's not. And I think that's the real education component for libraries and AI with our users. Same thing with coding. It's like you assume, like, you gave me good code. Maybe the code works, but maybe it's not efficient. Maybe it's bad code, but it looks like it works. And so it doesn't take away that you need to have some sort of domain subject matter expertise to actually validate the human validation on the end to say, yeah, this is good content or this is bad content. And I just feel that as libraries, we've been doing this for probably pre-internet, right? Like there's plenty of examples of looking at like a journal article and chart junk, and somebody having a chart that makes it look like it says one thing. And then you look at the methodology and you're like, oh, this is bad science. And I think libraries have a significant role in saying, this is good AI or this is bad AI, or here's a checklist of things that you should be looking for as the person that's going to use this information. Because if you use it, you're now part of that process and you kind of own some of that product, whether or not you generated it or not.
Yeah, now I'll just say that, I mean, I don't even know if you could scale the monitoring. I mean, it's the same thing that publishers are experiencing, and we're starting to see this in licensing language about not using licensed materials for training data. I guess I would lean more to the side of mitigation. I've seen it in my institution about setting policies on university, their internal model, as well as the medical center's model about what to put in. I mean, there have been specific policies about personnel data, FERPA, PHI, you name it, and to be able to educate people to understand if you're not using the internal models, as opposed to going out to ChatGPT, going out to Claude or Mistral or whatever, and being able to understand the difference between those two and the repercussions behind that. So there's been a huge amount of at least mitigation information and policy set forth to help with that. So Nancy, I was sorry to cut you off.
No. I'm glad you added. And before I ask my question, I want to give Laura a chance if she wanted to respond to that, or if we're good to go. I'm going to call out my colleague Jerry Perry, and I hope this is okay with you, Jerry, that yesterday you posed an interesting issue in chat about a clinical experience, an experience you had in the clinical environment where a physician was using an AI tool that you were then not later able to see the AI produced information as part of your electronic health record. And so I just wondered if you might want to talk or ask a question about patients' rights and with AI. Or if not, I'll ask that question. Or if you want to share about the experience.
No, it was just really intriguing. I went in for a chronic problem that I'm having. I don't mind acknowledging that. And part of the interface was my being asked if I was okay with there being an AI-assisted tool to generate the notes from the session with a physician. And of course I was. I mean, I'm supportive of all of this, right? Um, and in the process, I had some questions, but I also realized in going through that experience that I didn't and I wouldn't have access to the recorded notes. And, of course, there's a little bit of a power dynamic there, right? I mean, my experience, my health, my notes, but not my notes, right? And that was fine. And I have a cordial relationship with the physician. It's not like it was a challenging problem. But it really did make me think in terms of the conversation we were having yesterday around AI governance, ethics, all of those things. and what is the role for patients and the voice for patients in this experience. And I know in our Heal Work group, we've talked about it in the past. And in fact, it came up earlier today. We were having a really interesting session. I did an MCBK presentation to a Boston group that focuses on leadership in libraries. And that whole issue around patient advocacy and the role and the voice of patients came up. And I was asked, well, what are you doing to solve for that? And aside from experiencing that that problem, you know, and that power dynamic issue, I couldn't say that we were doing much yet, but I promised I would bring it up at this meeting. We really do have to work in our community around the agency question and the patient's experience.
Thank you, Jerry. And that is the point that I was hoping that you would bring up, that we as librarians have a role in terms of AI, and patients as stakeholders, patients as an empowered group here, and being at the intersection with AI in the clinical environment, and what we can, the value add that we could add, that we could have for patients, that patient perspective. Any other questions? We have, I think, still have a few minutes, so opening it up to the group. Please don't be shy. If you have a question, write it in chat or raise your hand. We'd love to hear from the librarians in the session here.
Well, Nancy, I'll just go ahead and fill some air here. Going back to the article, I mean, one of my favorite lines was just about, you know, the library and information science community being boundary spanners. Now, there are going to be limitations. Everyone's not going to be involved with the EHR. We probably can't understand most risk prediction models anyway. But I will say everything, whatever you can do in the upstream from EHR integration, all the way through. I think about my learning management system here with the School of Medicine. So they use Moodle. It's highly customized, but you begin to think, what is computable within the student medical record? What is computable within looking for outcomes and objectives and student learning too? So you know, you can think about computable data, information, knowledge, that spectrum, and all the technology that's in our institutions. So if there is somehow some way, you know, just listen out, ask, and just figure out how to be involved in that information spectrum in your institution, because it's there.
Thank you.
Nancy, I wonder if I could make a comment.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for the nice things you said about me a little while ago. I really appreciate that. But I do want to make a comment about why I think librarians and librarianship are so important to MCBK. I've, in many places, raised my own concerns about large language models and the fact that I think they have good potential for burning up the planet. And also, I'm an old-fashioned AI person. I believe in problem-specific models. And I asked that question yesterday of the panel, and they all agreed that problem-specific models or goal-oriented AI is still very, very important, and do not believe a tsunami will overwhelm of large language models will overwhelm goal-directed AI. If you think about goal-directed AI and the models in computable form that they require if they're going to be managed and if they're going to be fair and trusted, who knows how to manage that knowledge? Just because it's in computable form doesn't change the fact that it's knowledge represented, and knowledge that has to be represented using the ethics and methods that librarians have been using, every librarian is trained to use, and have been using for decades, if not centuries. So in addition to all the other reasons that have been mentioned, to the extent that we are going to package computable knowledge, including goal-directed AI machine learning models, librarians are absolutely essential if we're going to properly manage these models and enable them to be fair and trusted. So I welcome this panel, and I certainly believe that we can't get where we want to go without the full participation, support, and input from the health library community.
Thank you, Chuck. So, and like I said, Chuck has been a champion for having librarians in his space from the beginning, from the first time I met him. So, so, so we're, I think we're almost at time for moving on to our next presentation. I want to thank you all again, Laura, Bart, Philip. It's meant so much to have your input here. Really appreciate it. So many thanks, much gratitude.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And now I'm turning it over to my co-host, Josh.
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks for a wonderful panel. What a fantastic set of perspectives, and to understand what kinds of work that is already underway, and the exciting opportunities that lie ahead for libraries and CBK. Changing gears a little bit here, but still just as an important topic for this community is considering the chapter governance for MCBK North America. And if we want to make MCBK NA a professional home for all of us, for this community to thrive and to tackle the big challenges in CBK, I think that that home needs a strong foundation, and governance is that piece. And towards that, we've been very, very fortunate in having Dr. Nancy Lorenzi leading that effort, and in convening our working groups and current leadership, and beginning to think through how this the North America chapter can structure itself better to meet the needs of tomorrow and the needs of this growing community. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lorenzi. Dr. Lorenzi is a professor emerita at Vanderbilt's Department of Biomedical Informatics, Vice President of Strategic Change Management, and a clinical professor in the Department of Nursing. For the past year, Dr. Lorenzi has been partnering with the MCBK North America Steering Committee and leading that effort to grow our MCBK NA into an independent, member-led organization. So today, Nancy will provide an update to you on those efforts and get your input on how we might shape those efforts into a structure that will help us move forward together. With that, Nancy?
Thanks. Let me see how my high-tech skills are here. And we'll go with this. Okay, how are we doing? And does everybody see these?
And seeing it here, it's not quite the presentation mode. We see the two slides side by side. If you're able to move into the presentation mode, that would be
it's
fantastic.
Presentation mode where I am, but I have clicked this button. And is it still coming up with two?
It is, and I think, unless Nora, you feel like you want to display slides, I think I'm seeing the larger slide well enough that I think we could proceed.
Okay, yeah, Nancy, if you want to try minimizing this. Oh, okay. Yeah, that
Okay.
works too.
Yep. So I want to say a word about Chuck Friedman, because did you notice in my initials beyond the PhD was an MLS. So for those of you who are librarians, expect to be kept around for a long time. So with that in mind, I will go through my next role here, which is to talk about the North America chapter for governance. So these are the people that have been on the committee for the last year, but we've been talking about this one way or the other for more than a year. And you will see this. These are the people that are on the steering committee, the North American Steering Committee, and they have also been part of this process to review what we're doing. So we've been doing this for a while. And so this is moving us to a membership organization is really what we were trying to do. So we were initially, we see this as becoming an independent membership organization under and connected to the University of Michigan. But it could evolve into a membership organization elsewhere over time. And we don't know what that is, but we don't want to say this is it forever with Michigan. When we talked about things, we thought there were 3 core components to this membership organization. One is institutional members, and I'll talk about each of these coming up in a second. The second, the key is the MCBK NA governing board. I have tons of information about that, but I'm only going to say a few things because my eyes will glaze over if I go through who was going to be elected and who would be vice chair and chair and who's on the committee. And then the heart of this is individual members. So let me go through these 3 core components that the group is recommending. And one is the institutions. And so these institutions, and this is a sample of the benefits. These institutions are academic, not-for-profit, commercial. They have been with us the entire time, and they are probably a number of them on this in the last 2 days. They'll be here. The key is, if we want to get some of the institutions, we really need to approach some of them to become initial members, or maybe even called founding members. Now, when I say maybe, I'm leaving a lot of this up to the governing board to take what this committee is recommending and make it a reality. So we have, for each group, we have some benefits. And so some of the things that we have here is for a sample benefits, designate some of their people as individuals. So this means, like, what are we going to charge them? And again, this goes back to the governing group, because basically you don't want to pay for, $500 and then say, but I have 50 members I want. So those are the types of things that the governing group will work out. But they could also be a meeting sponsor, present their work. We might have an advisory council, or they'll receive all the material. There's many more things, but these are just some of the things for institutions. This is the key of when we move forward, we will start with this governing board. And it will be, we will go to Michigan and say, we would like MCBK NA to be a suborganization of the University of Michigan. Now, truth be told, we have already done that, and they have wonderfully said, yes, this would be great. We would welcome you as a member, and you could do all of your papers. So we would figure out who would be the 9-member governing board. They would have the initial members will have staggered appointments. But one of the sets of details I have is that once we have these staggered appointments, everyone else coming on would have a 3-year appointment. And then this goes with the first comment I made. At some point in time, it would be, we may have to need to say, well, Michigan is wonderful, unless you're from Ohio State, Chuck. Maybe we have to move from the University of Michigan to somewhere else. And so that's what some of the governing board will do. We have in our plan that we're talking about the members, where they might come from, etc. But the key of this will be the driver as we come through. Now, one of the keys that you've seen and you hear today and yesterday, the people that are talking, is the members are the drivers. Each one of you has been a driver in some capacity of where MCBK is today. So way back when, and this is like pre-COVID, Chuck Friedman wrote to a number of people about founding the MCBK organization. And of the people he wrote to, which was probably like 200, and 198 of them responded positively. From there, a manifesto was developed, and there were in-person meetings in Washington. Then COVID came along, and the meetings since COVID have been all through Zoom. Members are growing in excitement. Some of the things that we're sharing today are really exciting. And in the early days, it was things that we might do, but now it's things that we are doing. And that's where the excitement comes from. And so for those of you who are here today, we hope that you would be our members in the future. Bring your excitement, because you are truly the heart of the MCBK movement. I have possibly here, because again, this is another thing that would go to the governing board. We are recommending, this group is recommending, but the governing board, when it comes in, could say, no, that's not what we want to charge. So founding members, who are the founding members? Those 198 that wrote back to Chuck way back before COVID and said they were interested if they want to join, and if they were a founding, wrote back way back when, we would call them a founding member, and we could put them on the website, and we could do, just identify them as the movers and shakers that started this. Everybody else who wasn't in that would be regular members. So the only difference is we wouldn't put regular member on your name badge. It would just be a member. And if you'll notice, we're recommending the same dues. Now, the thing you see is supporting members. Every organization that I know, not only do they charge you dues, they have some kind of option that if you want, you could give extra money. So we're saying that if we're donating extra money, an additional contribution, we would also list you as a supporting member. So you could be a supporting member by giving $125 plus extra. If you were one of the founding people, you could be a founding member, founding supporting member. That'll take up the whole badge and your name won't be on it, so you could be incognito. Anyhow, and students we have for $25. So that's the goal that we have here. This is a number of different options because we were trying to look at what would be the benefit. And for those who are members and writing papers, you could see that there is a discount coming up for the learning health systems, and they're negotiating for other journals from that publisher, could be in the same area, but that is not yet a done deal. So these are some of the things that we have for the individual members. So I want to look at this because this summarizes what we're going to do. Our governing board, we want to keep that as small as possible and keep it out of the way, because governing boards shouldn't be the ones that are giving the papers and doing everything. They're service leadership. They're moving the rocks out of the road so that the members in the institutions can continue to do things. Institutional members, because we expect them to pay more, but there aren't going to be that many of them, are small and at the bottom. But our biggest group, I talk with my hands, so I apologize. The biggest group are the individual members, and that's the heart of what we have. So I thought that this is the time for questions. And I'd like to see if anyone has some questions about what this group, who has been working on moving us forward, could say. I also want to give Chuck Friedman an option to add anything to this before we open it up for questions. I'm going to shut this down unless I'm going to leave it up in case there's a question that comes up. Chuck, do you have anything?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I guess the main thing I want to add is really to thank the people at the University of Michigan who really have welcomed this idea and basically said, as they do for other entities, we would be pleased to have you take advantage of the established infrastructure that the university provides to help grow MCBK as a membership organization. They fully understand, and in fact, they may even have brought it up without us having to ask, you know, you don't have to stay forever. We realize that at some point in time, as Nancy said, it may make sense for MCBK North America to become part of another organization or to go out on its own. There are many reasons why I love the University of Michigan, and this kind of openness to collegial activity and the development of new ideas through these kinds of organizations is something that they seem to have as part of their DNA, their organizational DNA. So I just want to publicly thank them for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Questions from everybody about the three-part recommendation: a governing board, institutional members, and the majority of people would be individual members. Does it make sense? Does this, rather, I'm not asking you to sign up now and join or write your check before you get off, but does this make sense for moving forward in a strategic way?
Nancy, I'm seeing one question from Deborah Swain asking about consideration for retired membership due levels.
We did not, Deborah, we did not talk about that. That would affect me also. But so, no, we did not talk about that. That would be something I will write down and give to the governing board. But I do know that Amy does have retired person dues. Good question.
And if it matters any, Nancy, I see that there's a blue heart that goes along with Deborah's comment. So maybe there's one other person that that showed their support to this question.
Okay.
I see Nancy Alley has a raised hand. I just see a hand there. I guess I'm the one to click view. So let me go ahead and try that. Nancy, hopefully that worked.
Yes. Hi, Nancy. This is the other Nancy. So,
Okay.
and thanks for pointing out that you have an MLS. And thanks for your presentation. This is fascinating, this process, and I appreciate so much how much work that you have put into this process. Here's my question. It's not specifically about the slide that's up. My question is, might there be a consideration of founding member since it was several years ago, and if people currently might like to be a founding member but didn't have the opportunity for whatever reason to have indicated that previously, might there be a possibility that that could be a little more open? So just a question.
I don't have an answer, but basically it's great for answers. I have no answers for any questions, but I think this is another one for the governing board to say, okay, now that we're opening this up, does this change from those 198 people to maybe someone put a lot of sweat equity into the last 4 years, but we didn't know that they existed 6 years ago? And I think that that's a very valid question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy, L,
Yep.
I do have to jump in here with a small course correction. The writing to multiple people about founding an organization that generated 198 positive responses was in 2022. It was actually post-COVID.
Okay.
So, that said, I think Nancy, Ali's point is extremely well taken. Even though it was only just over 2 years ago that these people stepped forward. And I think having stepped forward in 2022, they all should be accorded founding member status as promised. That doesn't mean additional people should be denied founding member status. And that makes Nancy Ali's point, very important. And I think the governing committee should give consideration to that.
No, I think that's a valid point, because if we didn't know that X person existed in 2022, we could not have written to them, and therefore they wouldn't be in the process. So I think it's a very valid issue to discuss. Anything else as we move forward? Is there anybody that thinks that this is off track, or any comments for correction? If not, we have spent hours on this. And
I do see a comment from Preston that says, to me, it depends what the primary products of MCBK are likely to become, or will it serve as more of a convening body?
again, I love this role, because the governing board, when it's created, will talk about the direction. I mean, ours was to form the organization and create that governing board. So it could be a convener, but it also could have products. We do have the Learning Systems Journal as one of the products of basically MCBK. And so for that, the benefit is if you're a member and planning on writing, you have a 15% discount from the fees. So again, these are there's a difference between creating something and then the implementation as we're going forward. And so all these questions are, to me, more implementation, and they're very valid questions.
Nancy, if I could jump in here as well.
Yes, please.
Uh, later on in this meeting today, there will be presentations from the 3 working groups of MCBK, all of which have been established very early, and they've already produced many products and will continue to. So I would think that, to Preston's very important question, just look to what the working groups are and have accomplished uh, to see that it's extremely likely that there will be valuable products coming forth from those groups and maybe other groups that form in the future.
And the governing board could form other groups, or people here today could suggest groups that could be formed. So that's where we are with this, and it will move along to the steering committee, but we wanted the membership to know where we were.
Nancy and Chuck, I wonder if I hope this is not kind of opening things up too widely for a group meeting, but in thinking about the member benefits that have been considered so far, I think that was one of the slides. Since we have we have a community here together, I wonder if it might be worth getting some feedback from folks, because maybe there are some benefits that aren't on this list that people are getting out of interactions, either through the work groups or either through this meeting. Maybe there are some other benefits that haven't been captured here that might be interesting to hear from community members, either in the chat here and now or in a subsequent follow-up email, or maybe post chapter meeting survey or
Oh,
something
good
like that.
point.
With any thoughts or reactions to that idea?
No, I'm qualitative research, we gather data. So, but yes. Any comments? These are, again, as I was saying, we didn't want to bore you. So this is samples, and this is more complete, but it's not 100% for what we have on the list. So you could be on the board. If you're, again, we don't know where things are going for proposals and grants, but basically getting a letter from MCBK as a support for your proposal would be a benefit that we would do if you were a member. There could be members only forums. You could be on task forces, whether you suggest them or not, but it would be sort of decision-making task forces. So, and we don't know about discounted, we don't know if we're going to be in person in the future or not. But if there is registration fees, this one continues to be free. There would be discounted fees for conferences and registrations. So anything else that would be of value to you, let me know.
I think that's great, and I would open it up to the community. Throw in ideas or reactions in chat of things that you might like to see from MCBK that the governance committee could consider and potentially incorporate into a benefit or a value of membership in a future instantiation of MCBK. Nancy, one thing that just off the top of my head in the spirit of brainstorming, qualitative data gathering is, maybe there could in the future could be training opportunities or some kind of education that MCBK offers to its members.
Okay.
Specific to learning health systems or some of the what we saw earlier in considerations around AI and its application in CBK. Um, uh, there might be some opportunities there that in educational opportunities that could be offered to future members. I
And
see
what,
Nancy raised her hand. Nancy Alley.
okay, let me just, while you're still there, there's also maybe an opportunity to be a mentor to, or ask for someone to be can you mentor me? Or I'm sort of stuck on this. May I talk to you? Nancy, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to amplify support for, I think that's a brilliant idea. So Josh and Nancy, your openness to it. And so um, training, mentorship. I was just thinking about um, my colleagues, my library colleagues, and the presentations they just did. And if I wanted to have um, an, some kind of visit, a site visit to UVA or Vanderbilt or New Mexico during the balloon festival, but might there be some way for to facilitate sponsoring those kinds of opportunities? I think that is absolutely fabulous and fully support Josh's idea and Nancy, your openness to that.
I think that's a great, I mean, to me, first of all, I'm trying to get balloon tickets myself, and that's not easy. So the sponsorship, I think, is really good. So maybe some of the places could open up for a day or two visit. I think that once we can put this out and say, here's some opportunity, all we want to do is enhance and keep the channels open. That's the governing board. Let things flow so that we can take this. AI is out there. It's almost and it is something that could push this forward faster. And it would be interesting to see how all of this combines. So there's a lot of opportunity here, and it's exciting opportunity.
Yes, and beyond the libraries, the presentations we saw yesterday, and the centers and the institutes that are at other institutions where there might be some kind of mentorship opportunity. So the panelists that we had from academia and industry, how might we link opportunities to the members of the organization? I think that would just be so valuable.
This is a personal opinion. Organizations have not done a really good job with mentorship. They may have an evening of mentorship at a national conference, but it's not like ongoing. It's not like big brother, big sister types of things. So there's a number of different options. I think it's wide open, and it's an exciting time because things are changing so
There's a
rapidly.
great comment in chat about connecting with designers and artists. And so I love that kind of interdisciplinary perspective that's being mentioned, and the value add that could come from that kind of integration.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the time. I think my time is up, and I appreciate it, but I will be looking at the chat and copying things and putting it in here and trying to do another draft that we could see about how we're going to implement this. Thank you.
Well,
Both.
thank you,
Josh,
Nancy
Nancy.
Lorenzi, and thank you, Nancy Alley, the two Nancys. Thank you both so much, and Nancy, Dr. Lorenzi, thank you for your leadership in this effort. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
So I think now we're going to just take a quick break, a little breather for everybody, 15 minutes. And then when we come back, we will have our set of technical demos, which are really cool. I'm looking forward to those. So let's all take a step, get a little stretch in, drink a glass of water, maybe have an extra cup of coffee, and we'll see you in 15. Well, welcome back, Nancy. How's your day going? Oh, you're still on mute there.
Great. We've had some lively interactions and discussions, I think. So, um, I love the improvements that we're making to the for the governance. So I think the benefits and then opening up to um founding members, more founding members is great.
It's great seeing kind of these elements, these pieces coming together, and it's amazing how quickly time has flown since the first MCBK meeting, and it just shows, like, it's the governance piece is just another step in the progression of the community's growth and maturation. Yeah.
And the additional chapters that might open up. So there's UK, there's NA, there's possibilities for continental Europe, Taiwan, Australia. That's very exciting. And um, that global perspective that can come from that, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, and building on that within each of those chapters, having the work groups that represent the interests and of each of those regions, and so towards that, I'm excited to hear about updates from our own working groups later today.
Yes. So am I. So am I.
Well, before we get to our work group updates, I'm excited to share, Nancy, that, and then share it with the rest of our community here, that we have some awesome demos that we've lined up. So we will take the next half hour to go into and listen to and see pre-recorded videos, and the demo leads will be present within each of those rooms in order to engage with the audience members in a Q&A and have some back and forth. So let me just quickly go over some of the logistics of how we're going to do this here. So for Fareed Saifi, and I apologies if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly, demonstrating how diverse users of CBK artifacts can benefit from metadata-driven documentation and packaging. That is in room 1. So if you're interested in seeing this demo, stay here. Do not move anything anywhere. You don't have to do anything. If you're interested in one of the other 2 rooms, Preston Lee's Mitigating Clinical Knowledge Artifacts for Fire, or Janos Mata's, again, apologies if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly, Challenges and Solutions of an Interoperable Clinical Decision Support Implementation, then one of those rooms, what you'll want to do is go down to your breakout rooms option at the bottom, and then click on the room 2 or 3, and the breakout rooms are now open. I see that there. And if you're interested in knowing, the recording, these rooms will be recorded, both the demo and the Q&A. So heads up to our facilitators for any room, please be sure to hit record as we move into these rooms so that we capture both the demo and the discussion. So with that, let's go ahead now and everyone feel free to move to the room of your liking, and all together we will be back here in a half hour's time around. All right, thanks. Okay. Whoops. Am I in the right room? I see Nancy is here. I thought I was supposed to be room 2.
You're still
Oh,
Preston is in.
I'm 1. I'm room 1.
Yeah,
And
I
I
believe
see.
that's room 1. I can put
Okay.
you in room 2.
Sure. I see. Well, Preston is here as well. I see Nancy and Fareed. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. So I think somehow, let me see if I can't get into room 2 on my own, because I know I hit join. Let me try again. Okay. Oh, here's a okay, I didn't see this option before.
Yeah, I'm not getting the option to move. I'm getting an assign to menu.
Chuck, I can move you. What turn are you
3.
going to? 3? Okay. If anyone else would like to go to a different room and is having trouble, please let me know and I can move you to that room.
I think participants in room 1 are stabilizing, it looks like. So whenever we're ready to start video.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Farid Seifi, and I'm presenting this work on behalf of Knowledge Systems Lab at Department of Learning Health Sciences at University of Michigan. So today in this demo, I'm going to talk about how our model supports adding structured metadata to computable biomedical knowledge artifacts, and also how our tooling supports creating information pages for CBKs and to perform metadata-driven packaging for them. So before jumping into an example of such structured metadata and how our model supports creating them, I want to briefly mention the importance of adding structured metadata to CBKs. And also I want to mention a few examples of structured metadata and their usage. So just like any other model or object, metadata can be added to CBKs to benefit from different aspects. For example, metadata can contain information that enable discoverability and indexing. It can facilitate interoperability. It can capture provenance and attribution. It can describe context and scope of the CBK. It can track version control and updates, and so many other usages that are not even listed here. So as examples of structured metadata and their usage, you might already be familiar with model card reports. For example, Hugging Face model cards or Google's Model Garden, which uses the same idea. Those model cards are created using a structured metadata. So structured metadata is added to the model and accompany them, and then the model cards are created using those metadata as handy information that accompany the model and are used by different stakeholders who want to use those models. So that's one example of metadata and their usage. You might also be familiar with packaging software for distribution. For example, if you have a Python package and if you want to publish it on PyPy, you need to include metadata to facilitate that process. So now let's take a look from a high perspective to an example of such a structured metadata for CBK. So our model supports describing a knowledge object in the metadata. The knowledge object can have multiple knowledge elements. It can have multiple services defined. Services are ways to access the knowledge inside the knowledge object. So each one of the knowledge object, knowledge, and services can have multiple tests defined for them. And then each one of the items in green, the knowledge object, knowledge, service, and test can have multiple documentation defined for them. So as we see, our model supports multiplicity The metadata here are formalized by Koyo ontology from our group, and metadata are linked data in RDF formats that can be processed by machines. So now let's take a look at a more detailed example of such structured metadata. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to use one of the United States Preventive Services Task Force recommendations, the abdominal aortic aneurysm screening recommendation, which we have implemented using Python, and we have added metadata to it. So this is a simplified version of the metadata. At the top, we have the administrative and descriptive section where we talk about the type, title, version, date, description, publisher, license. So for the descriptive and administrative section, we use most of the terms from existing ontologies like Dublin Core. We only have one term defined in our ontology, knowledge object, to type this element. The next section, which is a more technical section of the metadata, we have in this example one piece of knowledge defined for this knowledge object, and this knowledge has its own ID. It's typed as knowledge, and it points to the implementation of the knowledge. Next section describes or adds a service to this knowledge object. It has its own ID. It's typed as service. It shows which pieces of knowledge it depends on, which is the knowledge defined at the top. And also it points to the implementation of the service. So considering we have this type of structured data, we have been looking at different ways that we can use it. For example, we have explored making human readable documentation from metadata. We have looked at packaging CBK artifacts using metadata. We have also looked at feeding CBK metadata into large language models to create chatbots. We also explored making metadata available to search engines. And this list is still going on. We are still looking for other ways that we can use such a structured metadata. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to focus on the first two items here. So we will see first how our tooling supports using structured metadata to auto-generate an information page, which is a more human-readable documentation from the metadata. And then we will look how the structured metadata can be used to perform metadata-driven packaging and include everything that's necessary for the knowledge object and pointed to from the metadata in a package. So let's switch now to an implementation of the knowledge object we have been looking at, the abdominal aortic aneurysm screening. Here in this folder, we have the services and knowledge implemented here. We have other files like tests are included. There is a license file, metadata file, documentation, and some other files. But let's take a look at the metadata file. This is a more complete example of the metadata we have looked at. Again, we have an administrative and descriptive section at the top. We have one piece of knowledge defined for this knowledge object, which we will look at it in more detail. So this knowledge has its own ID. It's typed as knowledge. It points to the implementation of the knowledge. It has some more administrative and descriptive information for the knowledge. For example, it shows where is the source of this knowledge and what was the date it was created and who is the creator and so on. This knowledge element has two different tests defined for it, and each one of these points to the implementation of the test. There is one piece of documentation defined here for this knowledge as well. And the next section has three services defined for this knowledge object. So each one of these services has its own ID. It's typed as service. It shows which piece of knowledge it depends on, and it points to the implementation of the service. And then at the end of this metadata, we have two different pieces of documentation defined for the whole knowledge object. So now, considering we have this structured metadata, we want to use our tooling to create a more readable documentation and information page for this knowledge object. In order to do that, we can use our Kgrid SDK, which is published on PyPy, so we can install it using a command like pip install Kgrid SDK. And then once it's installed, we can run a command like kgrid information page. And then we just need to provide the path to the metadata and then a path to where we want the information page to be created. So if we execute this, an information page is going to be created here. And then if I open that in the browser, here is how it looks. We have the administrative and descriptive section of the metadata showing here. We have services listed here, the 3 services that we saw in the metadata. The knowledge is listed here with its all details. The documentation and tests are listed on the right side. So before looking at some of these links, I just want to mention that once the command is executed to create this information page, it's going to look at the location of the metadata and how it's linked to a GitHub repository, and it will take the IRI of that GitHub repository and resolve all the relative links in the metadata towards that IRI so that we would be able to click on these links for the relative links and see the item behind them in the GitHub repository. For example, the ID in the descriptive and administrative section is linked to the main page for this knowledge object on GitHub repository. So we can click on that and explore all the files on GitHub. The license, for example, is linked to the file that's that includes the license information on GitHub repository. If we look at one of the services, the command line service has a link to the implementation. So if we click on this, it's going to bring us to the file, the Python file that implements that service. The same for knowledge. The tests and documentation are linked as well. Some of these links might be external resources. For example, the first link in the documentation is a link to a page on USPSTF website for abdominal aortic aneurysm screening. The second link is a link to a Jupyter notebook on Google Colab that we have created for this knowledge object, and it includes all the information that's needed for to find out how this knowledge object can be used and integrated in other applications. There is a link to the README file in the documentation as well. The tests are clickable, so we can click on each one and see the implementation of the test. So now that we have this human readable version of the metadata, the information page, we can see how this can improve FAIR principles for the metadata. For example, this information page can be indexed in search engines and improve the findability. It's more readable, human readable, and it provides access to all the links and information that is mentioned in the metadata. So it improves the accessibility in that sense. It improves interoperability because now different stakeholders can find this and can easily navigate through the documentation that can help them integrate this into their applications. So it improves the interoperability in that sense. And of course, it improves reusability because now people can find this, see how it works, look at the test, and find out how this could be used, and then they can reuse it in their applications. So let's go back to the example. And now let's say we want to perform metadata-driven packaging. So we can use our tooling to do that. We can call a command like kgrid package and provide the path to the metadata file. And then once this is executed, a tar.gz file, a zip file is going to be created here that includes everything that the metadata is pointing to. If I unzip that, just to show you, this is the folder, and we see that the implementation of the knowledge and service are included here. The tests are included here, license, metadata, README. We are still working on adding all the external resources that are linked to from the metadata. So once that feature is completed, we can assert that this feature can help create a package for the CBK and include everything that's necessary and needed and the metadata is pointing to in that package. And then that could be considered as one way of sharing this CBK with the world. So if you go back, these were the two different ways that I wanted to show you on how the structured metadata can be used. And as I mentioned before, this list is still going on when we are looking for other ways that we can use the structured metadata to improve FAIR principles for the CBK. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we have a few minutes for questions before we'll be joining the other breakout rooms will be joining us again. So either in chat or raised hand, anybody have questions?
I have a question if I can.
Go ahead.
So it looks, this collection of metadata elements, like structured metadata elements, looks very much similar to the common data elements that NIH collects and promote, or something that would appear in Phoenix toolkit. And I was wondering whether Farid is familiar with that, look at that, or any connection, synergism.
Yes, sure. Before answering that, from my perspective, I just want to mention that I have my other colleagues in this room that worked on this before I even joined the team. So I would encourage them to jump in and answer questions if they feel to. But yes, we have been looking at many other models, existing models, and we have developed our ontology and the model looking at other examples that exist out there. And this is a work that started, I guess, if I'm right, sometime around like before COVID, like 2017 or 18. The ontology started around that time. If it wasn't before that, that's for sure the time that is started. And we have been keeping an eye on existing models like what you mentioned. But the Koyo has been created as an ontology and used in the metadata that we saw as an example of for creating knowledge objects and to be able to describe them in the metadata. So that was our focus, but we have been considering other existing models as well, for sure.
Other questions?
Yeah, if I can, thank you, Fareed. That's a great question. So I'm Alan Flynn. I work with Fareed at the University of Michigan. The MCBK community has pursued a number of projects, to look at metadata for CBK artifacts in particular. There is a publication that came from this community. I put a link in the chat just now in PubMed. The publication title is Categorizing Metadata to Help Mobilize Computable Biomedical Knowledge. The lead author is Brian Alper. I think what you're seeing here today in the demo that Fareed provided is a commitment to linked data. So we're using metadata, but we're also using the semantic web approach to having linked data, which means that we can actually represent those data using multiple different schema or multiple different metadata models. And that's what Fareed also showed. So you saw some Dublin core metadata. You saw some metadata that's defined by an ontology our lab has created called the Knowledge Object Implementation Ontology. And in the linked data world, we can continue to enrich that data, with linked data using multiple different schema. which we think is very important. And so it's probably not ultimately about finding one perfect model for the metadata for CBK artifacts as much as it is creating metadata, on a use case by use case basis and trying not to recreate the wheel, but instead take advantage of schema that already exists.
Thank you, Alan. Other comments, questions? Anyone? Chat? Raise hand. Anyone? Fareed, I have a question. This is a basic one. On one of your slides, you said that you were working on making metadata available to search engines. And so just a question about, is that just a timing thing, or are there particular challenges there that would be holding up that process?
That was one project that was done in the lab, I guess before I joined the lab. So I let Alan answer that question. I can answer the maybe questions about using or providing the metadata to large language models, which was also mentioned on that slide, but I think Alan can answer that question better.
Yeah, Nancy, great question. Thank you. I don't think there are any particular barriers that I'm aware of. You know, if a CBK artifact, comes with its own web page, from a search engine optimization point of view, you can attach a lot of different content to that web page in order to make it, once the search engine crawlers essentially find it, in order to make it searchable. So that's just taking advantage of existing technology and existing methods. There's nothing new to that.
Okay.
What we want to show is that the metadata that we're producing can play a role in that process. So the idea is that you don't have to recreate a whole new set of metadata in order to engage search engines in that way. We can actually post these metadata that we have on a web page for a given artifact, and that will get you a long way toward that endpoint of findability.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Anyone else? Comments?
If there was any follow-up questions, my email is on the first page of the slides that I use, so I would be happy to answer questions or share any resources. All our works are open source and available on GitHub and our website, so I would be happy to share those as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll just say to close, this represents a turn that we've taken, which I think the community will appreciate. And that is, a couple of years ago, it was about trying to figure out and define what CBK artifact metadata might be. And now we're having defined that, we're starting to show uses for those CBK artifact metadata. So when you have them, what can you do with them? So that represents a step forward, I think.
Thank you. And there was a note from Janelle that Nora's room needs 5 more minutes because of video problems. So they'll be back in this main room at 4:05. So we can keep it open for conversation, questions. I'm gonna turn my audio and video off for a minute because I have to cough. So continue to mingle among yourselves and I'll be back in a second. I have another, this is a basic question. You're using GitHub to share this information to make it openly available. Is that your primary resource, or are there other tools that you use to share your information? Open kind of tools.
Yes. I guess for source code, we mainly use GitHub, but we have some of our tools also published on PyPy. For example, our K-Grid SDK, which I used in this demo to create the information page for the knowledge object, and also to do the metadata-driven packaging. That tool, the K-Grid SDK, is published on PyPy. It's written by Python, and it's available there, as well as the source code, which is also available on GitHub.
Thank you. We still have about 3 minutes. So I'm just going to keep providing an opportunity for anyone else to ask questions.
So about the usages of metadata, I mentioned that we have explored feeding the metadata to large language models. That work is still going on, and we are aiming for publishing it in with some extra experiments. But I just want to mention that the prior work on that experiment was I presented that before in MCBK. So if anyone is interested, I'm gonna just leave a link to that presentation here. But I'm hoping that we will report on the work that's going on in that area, hopefully next time in MCBK.
Excellent. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing the links. So then I'm going to ask another question just in terms of publishing venues. And so I have to disclose I'm the senior associate editor for the journal Learning Health Systems. And so when you're deciding where you're publishing your work, what goes into that decision making?
I think the main decision is like the main thing that we think about is accessibility, so that it's accessible to everyone. So by publishing, you mean publishing in journals or?
Journals.
Yes. So we look at what community is the best fits, this topic, and AMIA is where we are hoping to have this work published.
Thank you. And Alan was part of the startup of the Learning Health Systems Journal, so he understands why I'm asking that question.
Yeah, and we've been fortunate, Nancy, to be able to place work in the Learning Health Systems Journal. And I think particularly, when we think of the learning cycle model that was described earlier today in some of the presentations from our librarian colleagues, and when we detail how this kind of technical infrastructure work fits with driving learning health systems, then we do think about the LHS journal as the journal of this community, and we definitely want to get the word out there as well.
Thank you, Alan.
Hi, Nancy. I think the breakout rooms are closed, so just bring that to the attention.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll just pause for a minute while our colleagues join us.
Yeah, I know. I'm back from our room too, where we had a fantastic presentation by Preston Lee, and thanks to everybody for participating. Great questions.
We had a great presentation too, so I was in one, so now we just need 3 back in the room, right?
Well,
Group 3.
fortunately, they've all been recorded, and so they'll be made
Okay,
available
yes.
to us attendees. And so, yeah, fear not. The materials and hopefully the Q&As afterwards should have been recorded, and then they'll be available to us all. So that's fantastic. Thanks to the team for coordinating that, making that happen.
3 did a great job, Nancy.
Oh, that's Deborah, right? Thank
Yes.
you.
Chuck was there too. We asked good questions about fire and their use of the EHR and stuff they were using. So good.
Wonderful. We're glad you could be here today. Okay, so now we have, let me just thank our presenters for the tech demos. And then now we're going to move into presentations from our work groups. And we have 3 work groups that are part of MCBK North America. They'll each provide a brief summary and update of their work and future projects. We'll start with Dr. Rachel Richardson and her update for technical standards and infrastructure. Welcome, Rachel.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Josh. Can you see my screen? I tried to take over. Okay,
yes.
CBK. Okay, wonderful. Well, I have the honor of presenting on behalf of a group, particularly our CBK MM work group, which is the most active stream of the technical standards and infrastructure work group. And before I begin, I want to just give a quick special thanks to Ali Khalifa for putting together these slides and really taking a lead on some medication examples that I'll show you. And then Jamie McCusker, who really helped conceptualize and sort of bring us all up to speed on this semantic web representation idea of this. So neither could be here today, but I hopefully 1 or 2 representatives from the group that can correct me as I got to go through and try to give everyone a visualization and update of what we're doing. First, we're building on work from the technical standards and infrastructure group, in particular, what we call the metadata paper that Brian Alper was lead author on, and we had more than a dozen co-authors from MCBK North America involved in this. Alan Flynn mentioned this recently in our breakout just previous. So we're building on that. If people are interested, please do check those applications. Or publications, and also just some guiding principles for technical infrastructure development to really mobilize CBK. So building on that and acknowledging the fact that there are a number of different biomedical and computable resources out there, we started to look particularly in the medication domain. So here's an example of the kinds of things that are out there now, the resources. There's different CDS representation. So you imagine a statin guidance, clinical decision support, algorithms or rules that may be in FHIR. There could be an ontology of antibiotic resistance, or an ontology or knowledge base of genetic variants and medication responses. And so our overall question is really, how do we describe these in some sort of standardized way that could support their discovery and reuse? And so we're looking for sort of what's this minimum set of metadata that we could use to describe these. And so again, this is the focus of our group, the minimum metadata model. And the idea, we wanted to develop an open standard that would sort of computationally represent and describe various computable knowledge resources, and this could support authors and publishers and end users of CBK. The decision was made very early that we wanted to reuse existing metadata schema and frameworks such as DCAT, schema.org, and Dublin Core, and that we also wanted to reuse existing sort of biomedical domain-specific code systems and terminologies. And our goal was not and is not to make some monolithic standard or combine these into yet another standard or specification, but really to filter these existing schema and code systems into something that could get this minimum yet sufficient set of data elements to describe a whole range of different CBK that would fulfill various use cases. So to that end, we've sort of taken a stab at developing a minimum schema. And here's just a quick look at sort of the abstract structure of the model, where we have resources that can describe sort of abstract knowledge concepts, such as an ontology. And then these could be realized as either an OWL or an OBO file, for example, as artifacts that you could then download and share. And these are considered a concretization of the resource, the ontology resource. And so just to go a little deeper into the CBK minimum metadata schema, this just shows an example of the schema in the form of a JSON template. And so here we can see a few of the relevant data elements that deliver this context or description and use existing standards. So here what you're seeing, difficult to read, but things about, identifier, descriptors, provenance information, composition, sort of granularity in relation to between different knowledge artifacts, and then information on where and how you would access, download, and assess the version of it. And then taking that minimum metadata model, we tried to work with some different examples of medication-related CBK instances. So the same as I mentioned before, sort of a CDS or ontologies or different knowledge bases, we tried to apply this and show how this might be instantiated. So just to look a little closely at one example, so a CDS algorithm, for example, would be one instance of our CBK metadata. And you can see on the right, we've got subject, creator, publisher, and then the concretization information below. I'll dig a little deeper because it's hard to grab all this here. This slide just shows the terminologies more. So if you look on the right, you can see, blocks of SNOMED, then mesh codes. We're using ORC-ID for creator ID. So we're repurposing existing or in referencing existing code systems. And then on the bottom, you can see this is the concretization of it into the artifacts. So then you can see to the right specific artifacts, title, information, versioning, and that type of thing. And then these medication examples, that was just sort of a quick overview. There's a GitHub site, so you can look at those in a little bit more detail. And again, what we're trying to do is we just started with a set within this sort of domain of medications, looking at the different objects, but we recognize there's actually many more computable biomedical knowledge objects out there. So our goal is to identify more, apply this model, see how we can demonstrate how they could be, this description could be explicit and they could be discoverable and findable and accessible, and essentially sort of create a semantic web of CBKs. And again, the vision for this is really sort of three types of users: the knowledge creators, and the knowledge publishers, and then knowledge managers and users, and that people can describe and be able to find and discover different resources that are out there. So to that end, we've developed a few instances of this. Let me see this. I think I've had we're using linked data principles. We're really looking at minimum metadata interchange for the web. So this is really a semantic web-based vision. And then these are the information profiles. So we briefly thought of, okay, let's package these up into templates for the different types of users. So what is the minimum information that would be required to describe a knowledge resource, to structure one, and then to access one? So first, this MIDCAR, minimum information to describe a knowledge resource. We've got here just as an example, sort of basic information about title, description, subject, creator, that type of thing. Then we've got some minimum metadata around structuring a knowledge resource. So this gets at, in the top right, sort of the distinction between the knowledge resource and then the different artifacts that may express that knowledge. And then finally, there's some minimum information about how to access it. And so that would bring us towards sort of location and access type of information. And these three information profiles are modeled in, there's JSON templates in our GitHub repository, with the idea that people could use those as a starting point to then mark up different types of CBK in different domains. And then we're really looking for people and feedback on exactly which code systems are used and exactly which metadata elements are essential for different types of knowledge, for different types of use cases. So with just dealing with the medication example, we've sort of done a bit of a proof of concept of this, but our model was developed at a very abstract level, and we really need more specific examples in very different areas to identify, as I mentioned before, which elements are critical and which code systems can be used, and then how we can sort of harmonize those across many, many use cases. So we are, to that end, really looking for stakeholders and leaders in different areas of biomedical information to take this very abstract model that we've developed and apply it to different artifacts and use cases and let us know. And then our group would like to then sort of interface with different domain specific implementation groups and see if we can come up with a minimum. And we are working on a white paper on this approach. So if anyone is working with this type of CBK or others, really our next step is to share these minimum information profiles and sort of our vision. And we've got some guiding principles about this. Have people independently look at this with a variety of artifacts in their area to identify specific use cases, and then report back to us. What works, what doesn't, what are the essential metadata pieces, and can we then begin to harmonize those? So that I'll end there with just the update, but our call is we really are looking for people to take this, work through it in very domain specific areas and work back with us. We meet about every other week. And if you're interested in joining this effort, give an email to the standards leads at this email address, or contact us through the website, and we would love to see this continue. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. And I have a quick question. While we're going to be looking at chat to see what other questions there might be, but just, you said you were looking for feedback. What's your mechanism for collecting it? Is that an email to that link you shared, or are there other ways that people can provide feedback?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is through the link or the emails to MCBK community at this point, and then we'll get back with you. We're at a point, I think, with the work group, we've just, I think, done as much as we can with just the abstract model, and now we really need subgroups to form in very specific areas. And there's a lot of folks. I mean, there's probably about 10 of us working on this routinely, and so I think any of us would be interested in going to a meeting and helping sort of acclimate and get a group started on this. But we're really looking for subgroups to lead and test us out and give us some feedback that way. So starting points of email, and then we can work from there.
Wonderful. And then I'm just going to call out a PF Anderson's comment in chat that she'd be grateful if the GitHub link could be added to the MCBK project page.
Oh, yep, we'll do that.
Okay. And let me just do a quick skimming of questions to see if we have time for one more before we move on to our next presentation. Okay. So thank you again, Rachel, and we'll move on to our next work group. Our next group
trust and policy.
So our next group is Christy Navarra and Anthony Solomonides from Trust and Policy.
So I will begin, and Christy will continue. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, if you can get them in presenter view, that would be great. Thank you. Perfect.
Right. Okay, so trust and policy has had a relatively quiet year, but we are about to see some changes. And the first change that I'd like to highlight is to introduce Christy as the new co-chair. Christy's an informatician and information scientist, and she has extensive experience of health sciences research, and is now has responsibility in her local CTSA, and of interest to this group will be the fact that she has also served as a data librarian for 2 years before her present role. Christy is taking over from Josh, whom I really need to acknowledge very deeply. He has moved on from a leadership position, but continues to be a great influence in the group. And of course, as you can see, he's not given up. He's still very much engaged with MCBK. So Josh, thank you very much. And I should say as well that if it weren't for Noor, I would have dropped many more balls than I have actually dropped. So one of the things Christy and I said we would do on taking on the joint responsibility would be to review the charter. Now, why is that necessary? Well, looking at the present charter, it is eminently reasonable, directed at the kind of the kind of CBK that we've been considering so far. But when you reflect back to yesterday's first part, well, in fact, the whole of yesterday, maybe the whole of this conference, the impact of AI has been so prominent, so massive, that we really need to make a more conscious acknowledgement of the need for trust in AI as it interfaces, as it feeds into CBK. So what's changed? Well, the attention to AI and the range of principles under consideration now, such as explainability and transparency, that weren't so prominent when we were looking at the kind of traditional CBK we were considering hitherto. So some CBK incorporates AI, some CBK may be generated by AI. We heard about that yesterday. Some AI is CBK, it's designed to integrate into larger workflows. On the other hand, what Rachel has just presented is something that Trust and Policy has tried to keep up with, though we haven't really made as big a contribution as we might have. But addressing trust characteristics beyond fairness in the models is part of our brief. And questions like, how does CBK maintain its integrity as it evolves in use, if it's AI-based? How is it incorporated into larger workflows? And what would be appropriate criteria for semantic interoperability? One of the dreams is that one could take different pieces of CBK and pipeline them in a way that they understand each other and make sense of the overall longer chained together workflows. So this is something that we will be discussing and debating and hoping to return to the steering board with a revised charter. Very briefly say something about 2023 to 24, the last 15 months or so. Well, first, just to acknowledge the work that Rachel has just presented. Josh and I have to some extent kept up with attending the meetings, but really all credit goes to the people that Rachel's already talked about. Great work. Josh did participate in a great poster that presented the three models. But again, this is stuff that you already heard about. And the other thing that was a great feature for Trust and Policy is a number of presentations. Robert Reed talked about his paper on managing tensions in the learning health system. Preston Lee talked twice actually about the development of a model facts label. And Paige Nong gave us a talk on her NEJM paper about how academic medical centers govern AI prediction tools. One of the things that we focused on was the question of what popularly called nutrition labels. And I'm going to flash through a few slides more in the interest of the references. If you want to pick up the slides later, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them now. But we had this example from Mark Sendak at Vanderbilt. We had this from Preston. And then the latest events in the national scene make us wonder whether, in fact, any guardrails and anything like nutrition labels will be adopted in the future, given that the AI guidelines have already been scrapped. So over to Christy, Christy, I'll drive the slides for you, but Christy has some very interesting work to report.
Thank you so much. Really glad to be here today. I will speed things along and make sure we have time for the next work group and maybe a few questions. Next, wait, let's see. Sorry about that, Tony. Can you go back one slide? So an example of a future opportunity is to continue work that started in 2023 with a group of folks, and I will, you'll see those names in the next slide. So it represents, the need for flexible and scalability in CBK. And the Trust and Policy Work Group is interested in continuing the work. And I think it's fair to say that there's some amount of job security in this area, given all the information, even in the last 2 days, that's been super useful. So I think one of the things I heard today is the problems that we're looking to solve and staying at that level. And I think that was the effort of this group to do that. And given the changing landscape of AI and trust, all the new frameworks, all the new information, ways to think about things differently is a great opportunity. Okay, next slide. So here are the folks that we worked with in that effort, and it was a really great team. We actually were formed as a result of CTSA informatics group, and it was a work group from there that kind of split off, and we started looking at trust in general and came to the conclusion, actually next slide please, Tony. So we looked at whether or not we could just do trust for informatics, and what we came to is really we need to have our use cases and our problems that we're trying to solve if we are going to be able to take a bite of that elephant. So we wanted to evaluate current frameworks for building a trust maturity model for AI in health. And it started with frameworks, policy recommendations, guidance that were available at that point in time. And one of our challenges, which we'll talk about later, is trying to, lock it down for one point in time, because the next day you may have something that's relevant and important. So what we were able to do is collect the different frameworks and then do an analysis to figure out the baseline framework. And actually, next slide, Tony, if you wouldn't mind. So what we did is there was the Coalition for Health AI at the time, and we really liked that framework. It was one of the early ones. It incorporated NIST, and there were some other really pragmatic things about this. So we just started to pull out attributes. And when we were looking at, we did a two-way evaluation to see if other frameworks had things that this did not include, or if we were needing to, evaluate in the future, maybe the completeness of a previous framework. So here are the main attributes that we came up with. I think in hindsight, the one that was interesting is the social determinants of health were not included in CHI. So that we found in another framework that was actually local here to UC Davis Health. We have an analytics committee in our overall governance structure, and they created that there, which was really interesting, but it had most of those components. All right, next slide. One of the factors that we wanted to look at as far as maturity, because it was very big, we have lumpers and splitters. So we wanted to split and here was something that made sense, and also why we think it's useful for the trust and policy work group is because we talk about technology and people, but what are the processes that help drive those, the policies that help drive those, and making sure that they are understood across the organization. Okay, next slide. So one of the big factors was who can use this. And again, we wanted to be really pragmatic. So this could be somebody developing an AI related solution. It could be plugged into a governance committee where you're just starting to look at these types of projects. Let's see. Next, please. Okay, so how does it benefit a learning health system and implications for future work? So like I talked about, the lessons learned here was new information is coming in, and we're just had to stop it in time. So there is always a way to do flexible and scalable, I think, with staying connected to groups like this and others. Let's see. We also have an AMIA maturity model work group. So it's funny that there's a lot of overlap with individuals that have our chairs on different committees. So we have a lot of resources out there to help us align with best practices. I also think the nutrition label was something that we talked about. It was just a future phase. And as much as I've heard about it in the last few days, it's a really interesting possibility for us to look at maturity on how mature are you when you have a nutrition label? Do you get bumped up the maturity model? Okay, next slide. So looking forward is where can we integrate these attributes into our MCBK trust and policy work, and looking at populating the maturity levels. I think that's the biggest challenge is where are you, and the recommendations we have and we know that are effective, but they're not easy, is to do the extremes first. So that is as far as we got on this, but also to figure out how do we do long-term oversight and help organizations reduce risk, increase trust around their AI related tools. Next, please. All right, all are welcome to join. These are all great questions. I think one of the nice things about this work group is really that, you know, we can take on a variety of different things. There's plenty of interesting questions to ask. So the more the merrier. We meet 1 hour monthly, and we really value ideas and discussions. So reach out to us if you would like to join. And let's see, next slide. We have another. Oh, yes, and I took that from Ariel. I just thought that was had to be reused. The last link there is a resource guide. I will put that in the chat. It's Ariella last year did a lightning talk. It's 5 minutes. It summarizes exactly this project and how far we went on it. So I put that in this True Health AI resource, which is where we put our frameworks and things like that, just to summarize what we did. So I will put that in the chat right now. And with that, thank you so much. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Christy and Tony. We really appreciate that update. And so we have one more group to present. And so while people are writing comments or questions in chat, if you and Tony might want to look at those, and then we'll move on to our work group 3, which is Josh Rubin and Terry Wheeler from Health Equity and Access to Learning, or the HEAL group. Welcome, Josh and Terry.
Hi there. Thanks so much. Appreciate the brief introduction. So we want to spend a few minutes today telling you about what the HEAL, the Health Equity and Access to Learning, or short acronym is HEAL, what we've been up to in this past year. So next slide. So I want to thank Josh Rubin and Jerry Perry, who have been, Josh took over for Jerry when he retired, but Jerry has been so active that we consider him still part of our leadership group, and we love his participation. Next slide. So our shared vision for HEAL, we focus on promoting health equity and ensuring access to learning about MCBK. Our core value is that every decision affecting the health of individuals and populations should be informed by the best available knowledge, and that knowledge should be made widely accessible. Next slide, please. So these are the 3 areas of advocacy which we focus on, and you'll see this as we describe our work for this year. So next slide. Here we've identified some selected accomplishments. So you've heard already today that last April we published a call to action paper in the Journal of the Medical Library Association. And we followed that with presentations on what MCBK was and how librarians could interact with it in 6 different library forums. We were invited to present MCBK at the National Network of Libraries of Medicine's Love Data Week, and that initially was for the 13th, which is the day before Valentine's Day, but it was rescheduled. And so we will have some more information upcoming on that in the next several weeks. We also highlighted readings on embedded bias, and we have an open educational resource done by Dr. Debbie Swain on MCBK, which is freely available. Next slide. So this is a list of presentations that we've made in the last year to various library audiences. As I mentioned a minute ago, the NNLM's Love Data Week was initially planned for February 13th, but was postponed. And we should have more information. We've been back in contact, and we should have more information about when this will be rescheduled, hopefully in the next week or 2. Josh is going to talk a bit about slide 7 since he's so prominent, prolific an author here.
Okay. Look, I just really wanted to talk about the idea that, what's really at the core of driving us actually, and, integrated into many is this idea that, again, that knowledge is power, knowledge can save lives, but we have to get this knowledge into the hands of many, many people, each and every member of society, and make it accessible, make it usable. I was almost going to joke about the idea, the word equity, isn't popular in the current administration. So maybe we should change our name from HEAL to Health Equity and Access to Learning to Democratization and Empowerment through Access to Learning. DEAL, DEAL. They might like that better anyway. But no, but big piece of what we published has been on this idea of putting knowledge into people's hands. That's at the very beginning of the MCBK manifesto we came up with in 2018. But it really goes back to what the very first MCBK meeting was or the very first after the meetings in Ann Arbor. I'm sorry, I'm not doing the history right, but when we first had this big national meeting at the National Library of Medicine, it was in the Senator Lister Hill Auditorium. And the side of that auditorium, inscribed in the marble in 1965, is a quote from Mr. Hill saying, "We must develop a communication system so the miraculous triumphs of modern science can be taken from the laboratory and transmitted to all in need." And that clearly, that goes back, well over half a century. But a big deal for health, Brian Albert just wrote. Exactly. We are a big deal for health. That goes back over half a century, and that has been what this group is very much about. And that is at the core of what we're doing, and that just fits into every paper, that fits into our Love Data Week presentation that is going to actually now happen again. It was shut down because of the NIH shutting down, at any meetings, but that is going to happen. We're in the process of rescheduling. I'm going to guess for late March or early April. So I guess. But anyway, onward. Let's talk about what are the big next steps and how to get involved.
So, next steps. So we have here what we're planning on for in the coming year. We're planning to publish, you've heard about this, I believe, already in this conference as well. We're planning to publish a special issue of the Learning Health Systems on health equity and learning health systems. We are continuing our collaboration with the National Health Services, or NHS's Health Equity and Education Librarians Group from the UK. And we're continuing to introduce MCBK to various libraries and other audiences as opportunities arise. In fact, Jerry and I believe it was Amy presented on MCBK earlier today to an audience of librarians in Boston, library leaders. So every time we get an opportunity to explain what MCBK is, we really try to take it. We are developing a visual abstract. I think Jerry mentioned this earlier for the JMLA, so that we can put this concept of MCBK into a visual form to convey the important work of MCBK. And we hope to survey stakeholder communities to identify shared future plans that we can partner with to achieve together. And we would love in the feedback time, in the comments time, we would love to, in questions time, we would love to hear your ideas about what you think we could be doing in this coming year and your interest. So with that said, the next slide shows when we meet every second Tuesday of the month at 11 o'clock Eastern. And we would love to have you join us. And so let's go to that last slide and see if we have any questions. I would love to open it up.
So I just want to acknowledge how much of an amazing leadership role Terry takes in this, how Jerry, who is succeeded at so many things in his life, but has failed at retiring with a sense of he's trying to get out of this group. And of course, that group that we meets every Tuesday, as Terry mentioned, that if it wasn't for NOR, of course, we wouldn't have the anywhere near the capacity. So I thank them, and of course every group member who's such a big part of it.
Thank you, Josh and Terry. And I want to say, while you're our last work group to present, you're certainly not least, and we appreciate so much everything that you're doing. And now I think we are going to have a poll that allows people who are who may not be part of a work group already to indicate which work group that they might be interested in. So you should all see this on your screen. I hope that's happening, and please respond. We would love to have your participation in the work groups.
Yeah, so I see we have about 8 responses so far. So yeah, just please respond. That way I'll know who I should direct any emails to about possibly attending one of the future work group meetings or having a conversation with any of the work group co-chairs.
Maybe we should have some like Jeopardy music playing as we watch the numbers come in.
Yeah, I think I'm going to keep this open for another like 30 seconds or so. I see about half of the participants have responded. So if we could get the rest of you responding in the next 30 seconds, that would be great. I have also mentioned our general MCBK info email address in the chat. So if you feel like maybe sharing this with anyone else who isn't at the meeting but would be interested in this work, please direct any requests to mcbk-info@umich.edu.
You know, Noor, maybe while leaving the poll open, and since you have the mic, would you like to just maybe recap once more the next steps for materials that go out, recordings and the like?
Sure. So the meeting materials that will go out, and this will be after Monday, March 3rd. All of the recordings for the presentations we had on both days, the slides associated with those presentations, and then chat and discussion records from the Zoom meeting. We have all of the posters and demos recorded, so those will be shared with you. And for the demos today, we did record the breakout rooms so that the Q&A discussion was also captured. If there is, for some reason, just because, I don't know, there's like a lot of confusion about what people are, you know, openly sharing or not sharing. If there's anything that you're like, you don't want your name associated with it, or, you know, just something in the chat, then like, please do let me know. I don't want to cross any boundaries here. So again, mcbk-info@umich.edu. That is how we share all the meeting materials, and also if you have questions, you can direct them to us. All right, and I see again that we've had more people respond to the work group poll. I'm about to close it, so if you haven't told us yet, please enter your answer in the poll. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Noor. And thanks all to all of our work group leads. And it's a commitment on your part, and your efforts are, we celebrate your efforts and all that you've done to help make MCBK's a really solution, really awesome, and for increasing involvement and doing all the outreach that you have. So to Rachel and Jamie and Tony and Christy, Terry, Josh and Jerry, thank you all so much for the work that you've been doing with the work groups. It's really appreciated. Well, Nancy, I think we are.
Oh,
Oh, wait, Jerry. I think I saw Jerry has his hand up.
Yeah, if I could, can I just make a quick comment?
Of course.
I just was really excited to hear Christie's presentation, and it made me realize that the scope of interest that trust and policy has had around bias and equity obviously relates to the work that we're doing in the HEAL group. So I think there's some real opportunity for some deeper engagement and synergy there. And right, I think that that's just a really rich area for us to look into. Maybe as we think about our priorities for the next year, some conversations need to happen in that space.
What a terrific idea. Thank you, Jerry.
Absolutely. Well, Nancy, I think we've come near the end of the finish line for MCBK North America 2025.
I think so too. And I want to call out one thing. My colleague P.F. Anderson sent me a direct message in chat, and I just want to, as part of our wrap up, read what she wrote, which she said. I love these small meetings with a lot of people passionate about the same things, great presentations and discussions. And I think that certainly resonates with what the afternoon has been.
Absolutely. Thank you, PF. For what it's worth, Nancy, I think that, I've been recounting the great materials and presentations and talks and connections that we've made over the last couple of days. Things that stand out for me are, I think, Dr. Abel Coe saying that for AI and in healthcare AI knowledge, like the cow was out of the barn. That just that stuck with me, right? But to have their own internal survey, I think, where they had 100% of physicians saying there's no going back from AI. I think maybe it was for transcription in that case, but that number was really like, wow, what an opportunity there is, but also a marker for huge changes that are to come when you have that much buy-in from
Yeah.
clinicians, and how they want to interact with knowledge is going to be is a real eye opener for me.
And I liked what Laura Hall shared just in terms of her slide that about AI, how important critical thinking and integrity is to the process. And so I think that there's so many ways that our community can be involved in helping to ensure thoughtful thinking and safeguards. I heard the word safeguards, I think, used throughout our meeting, and that's important, I think. So,
Yeah, and I think maybe to tie it all together, just the thinking about how what opportunities pose from AI, from learning health systems, from librarians' roles, and everyone else in between, how we're going to be looking to the developing technical standards and how they'll necessarily need to tie in to building trust and promoting equity in all that we do, and promoting computable biomedical knowledge, particularly for learning health systems. And so I think for that reason, this community is just fantastic in representation of all the great minds and the fantastic efforts that people are putting towards this really interesting and important area of work. So thank you all for being part of this and for joining us these last couple days.
I think that is so eloquently said, Josh. So I really appreciate your tying it all together that way. And I'll just say too, one of the things that I'm excited about just is the global perspective that can be gained from the new chapters that might be opening up. And so um, the North America chapter, the UK chapter, possibly continental Europe and Taiwan and Australia. So exciting to think about that growth potential.
Well, Nancy, thank you for partnering with me on this really fun journey. And it's been fantastic working with you.
I remember when Chuck asked me to be part of this, invited me to be part of it, he said, and you get to work with Josh Richardson. And that was like the selling
Oh, geez,
comment about
get
it.
out of here. Okay, all right.
Really happy to be co-host with you, Josh. So thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and please stay connected online, and we'll see you through work groups and through emails and hopefully in person. Have a great rest of the last few hours of the week and into the weekend.
Yes. Thank you all so much.